Retro Hangover is supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We'd especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Ashton Ruby, Randall Quiggle, Tony G, Stud Still Smash the Milkman, Keith Gasper, Raging Demon, Miss Peachy, Mass Keaton, Diskai Mara, Ozzy Garcia, JC, Megan Caruso, Andrew Liguori, Lunchbox, aka the Disgruntled Gamer, Adam from The Good, the Bad, the Backlog, Rick Firestone, Dave Jackson, Jenny E, Retro Overdrive, Soha, Parallax Puddles, The Emperor, Storm Beagle, Matt, aka Stormageddon, B. Ross and Van Fernal from Super Garbage Day, Gary Heather, the Retro Vixen, Eric Guess, Nomad from the Retro Wildlands podcast, Ash Events, Alan Bingham, Mike the Ref from Backbreaker Gaming, Ryan, Player One, Low 5 Alex, Alt, Renner Dreaming, and Oh Me. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to the most recent episode of Retro Hangover.
Welcome to the podcast where we consider corny chronology clinging cardinally to Chronos cacadrosis. That's what I get for picking a weird word. This is Retro Hangover. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen, with special guest, Matt, aka Stormageddon, from Fun and Games and Reignite Podcasts. One of the patron saints of podcasting, Tony G, the Wolfman. As always, your host, Shane. Black Dick Wind Howling Dragon!
All right, Ashton, please put in a sound of a wolf howling after he introduces him, because it sounded like one of those shock jock radio stations, and I want to I want to lean into that if possible. Thank you.
I would love that. Just right after I say Tony G, the Wolfman here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Just do that one. He did it. That's his
there
voice.
You go.
That is his voice.
That's beautiful.
Put that out and put it earlier.
There. Love it.
Not like I work with dogs for a living or anything.
Welcome back to the show, Matt. It's a pleasure to have you here. It feels like you were just here not too long ago with Metroid Zero Mission, so happy to have you back. I know immediately when you found out this won the Patreon poll, even before that, you wrote in like, hey, if this wins, I want on. And I was like, you're such a good guest the last time. I'd love to have you back on here. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for telling the lighter side of it, and not the fact that I essentially bullied my way back onto the podcast by going, this is my favorite game of all time. I have to talk about it. But I am happy to be back. I love the show. I will say it every time. Being a fan of the show and listening, when you do your intro and I'm in person, of course, Discord can't handle the manliness, and you cut out for so long. And it's like, is he still there? Are we all right? What happened? It gets me every time. But I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
I purposely tried to go as long as I could, longer than normal, just because the reactions, you don't always get like that great of a reaction from both yourself and Tony. So I did whatever I could for the both of you. Speaking of which, welcome to your first appearance on the show proper. I don't think we've recorded a couple of guidance for the Patreon. I don't think you've been on any of those yet, Tony. Maybe one of the Final Fantasy V Forge Out Fiesta ones. But if not, this might be your like published debut. So welcome to the show.
My first mainline. I mean, we've played a lot of Yeast and a bunch of other stuff on the Patreon.
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 I don't think that's come out yet. I don't think it's come out yet, though. I think it's still in the backlog. So people have not heard your lovely, lovely Wolfman voice.
You know, I try. I'm going to make this into more of a shock duck thing. I'm going to completely change the dynamic. You've unleashed havoc, and you know what? I'm here for it.
See, that's going to be a pain because in those rare instances where I need to step in and edit, and Ashton's going to do his magic, and all of a sudden, like all this random crap's going to be thrown in thanks to Tony G, and I'm going to have to be like, shit. So thank you. I appreciate it. All I'm saying is improving the quality of the show. Always here for it. Thank you for the ideas. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
Shane, how about yourself? How are you doing?
You know, I'm doing okay. Is this a natural segue into like what I've been playing, or is that later? Is this one of those like workplace interactions where you give me that like half smile and you ask me how I'm doing and I say good and then you say good and then we go our separate ways and learn nothing about each other? Is that what this is?
Yes, because I really don't give a shit. So, I mean, just say great.
Awesome. Yeah, no, fucking living the dream. Thanks. How about you?
Great.
Okay, good. Cool.
Excellent.
Have a great day. See you later. Bye.
Yeah. See you at the potluck. Look forward to it.
Say next time I see you, if I'm in the elevator, I'll make sure to try to mash that door close button as quick as possible and pretend that I don't see you walking towards it.
Oh, I had a rough night at Taco Bell the night before. So, I mean, mash it as much as you want to, because I'll be mashing too.
Great. That's a situation where you are not allowed in a hotel pool.
That is true. There are rules against that.
Yeah.
What, farting in the pool?
No, hotel pools specifically have signage out there that's like, yo, if you've had diarrhea recently, please don't get in the pool.
The fact that we have to tell other humans that kind of makes me sad. Just a little bit.
I mean, anytime there's a warning about something, that just means that it's happened at least once before.
Right, exactly.
At least once. At least.
I mean, it's just the Pirates of Dark Water. It just starts out as a small black spot in the pool and then spreads and takes over the whole pool. Really good cartoon. You should check it out, kids.
I now want that to be like the Urban Dictionary definition for having diarrhea in a hotel pool. Just call it the Pirates of Dark Water.
Yeah.
Noija tut.
Just do it during a Splatoon conference and call yourself the evil squid monster.
Oh, good Lord.
But you have to scream, I'm a squid now, while doing it.
Oh, man.
But I don't think any of us are playing Splatoon. Maybe I could be wrong, but we're about to find out what everyone is playing. And we always start off with our guests. So I will start out with Matt. What have you been playing lately?
So I continue on my adventure of playing too much at once because I say yes to too many things. I am playing a few retro PlayStation games for a thing that I can't quite talk about yet, but you know, is going to be a lot of fun. Revisiting some stuff from my past that, a spoiler alert, isn't really holding up. There's something about the platforming in a PlayStation game that I just remember it being better than it was. So I've been playing Soul Reaver, and I'm a huge fan of the Legacy of Kain series. And I got about 3 hours into it, and then my file on my Steam Deck got corrupted, so I lost my save. So I'm done with that one, I think, for now. And then I've been also playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, which I'm still bad at. I was bad at it 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm still bad at it now. I've been playing those, and then I just got code for a Ranger, a role puzzling adventure, which is a new indie game. It's the art is done by the guy who did Braid. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And it's a new game from a new studio. And it's a mix of an RPG and a slide puzzle. It's really interesting. You are this character that moves along the map. And when she does, she moves the walkway with her. And you use it to solve puzzles. And I just started it tonight. I only got about 20 minutes into it. But it's really interesting and really fun. I think that's it. What else? Oh, and I got into the closed beta test for Marvel Rivals, which is essentially Overwatch, but with Marvel heroes. Like when folks were saying it's like it, I mean, I won't say it's exactly copy paste, but it's very close. It's a similar kind of hero shooter. I played it for about 2 hours last night with a bunch of buds who are also in the closed beta. It's fun. I like Overwatch. I haven't played it lately because I haven't really liked the direction Overwatch 2 has gone. But I do love Marvel, and getting to be a tank as Venom, one of my favorite characters, and kind of bully my way through the missions is a lot of fun. It runs okay. It's got some bugs, of course. It's closed beta, but all in all, I enjoyed playing it. It has a bunch of really interesting character choices. They make like Doctor Strange is a tank. Magneto is a tank, which is really interesting. You can like shield other people and shield yourself. Use the metal around you. It's really interesting. If you're a fan of Overwatch, I could see you really enjoying this game. It doesn't have a full release date yet, but I'm enjoying the closed beta. I think it only goes for like a week or 5 days or something. So I'm going to try and get a bunch of time there with that. I think that's kind of the big ones. I finished a bunch of games last month, but those are kind of the things that I'm toying around with now. I mean, Chris knows I haven't shut up about replaying Sonic Adventure last month, which also is for secret reasons. And that was a lot of fun to revisit, though some people in the Discord might disagree. Keith. Anyway, more on that later.
Ah, yes. Keith, the resident contrarian.
If I can't throw shade at Keith, is it really a Retro Hangover episode? I mean, come on.
True.
All shade can be sent at Keith whenever it's necessary, especially when it comes to Sonic. It's mandatory.
I mean, it is. It's required. And then, and then I've also, of course, been playing the game du jour. I didn't finish a run of it because we'll talk about this in the main time, but I played this game more times than I can count. But I did like boot it up on the Steam Deck and play it a bit to see how the PC version's gotten better and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think that's it for me. I'm also old and can't remember things. So, that's how it goes.
It's fair.
Looking forward to this project that you're talking about here. Looking forward to what might that be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're really going to like it, Chris. I think if anyone on the show would enjoy this thing, this super secret thing no one knows about that I'm working on. I have to admit, I am really bummed that I didn't get to play this month's review crew game. I was gonna, but I kind of bogged down with some other review codes and stuff and getting into some things for fun and games. And so I bounced on this one, but I'll be back for next month. And I'm excited to vote for whatever people nominate for next month as well. So
same. I'm in the same boat, so I feel you. How about yourself, Tony? What have you been up to?
So I did play the review crew game for the month, Dallas, and I about had a mini meltdown yesterday and the day before trying to beat the final boss. So that was an experience. I'm great at platformers. If you don't know anything about me, that's what you should know. 100% best platformer there is and ever was, and that might be a lie. But other than that, I've been playing SMT5 Vengeance. So I've been seeing the upgrades, and I think I'm at the point with that company where, you know what, when they release a game, just wait like 3 years because they're going to release a super updated, cool version of it. They've done it with like the past 3 or 4 releases. So that's kind of like what I've been doing in between traveling around the East Coast because I'm moving and buying a house and all that fun military stuff that you get to do every 3 years.
I can't. Yeah, I'm not going to miss that part. I'm not going to miss that part at all. It's going to be. Ugh. I'm already not doing it. I know this is an audio show, obviously, but if you can't see me, my beard is becoming beautiful. I'm loving it. You'll get there. You'll get there someday, Tony. I have
One
faith
day,
in you.
3 years from now.
There you go. All right. What about yourself, Shane?
I feel like I've been somehow cutting back, if you can believe that. I think the last several times. I know, right? Like, how is that even possible? Remember when I said that I was playing that new MMO called Terrace Land? I think I mentioned that 1 or 2 episodes back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I am anymore. I think I've put that one down. Nothing wrong with it. I've just sort of like, it reminds me of when Old Republic first came out way back in the day. In that you get through it fairly quickly and then find out that there's no content. That was the issue with that game back then, and that's kind of the issue with Terrace Land right now. Is I leveled my character fairly quickly. It doesn't take long, and the level cap's only 40, so it really isn't that much of a grind. You don't even finish the main story before you're level capped. I feel like maybe a little bit of a balancing issue there, but anyway. And it's fairly easy to get maybe not best in slot, but very close to best in slot gear, just by doing some really basic stuff like running some dungeons, doing random dungeon queues and whatever. And so I did all that, and I kind of feel like I'm done. And it didn't really take me that long. I'm not sure what their roadmap is for content, but also given that I'm trying to get more time in on FF14 now that I've got some, well, I guess I always had some people in the Discord trying to root for me to do that, but I guess now I'm actually listening. So anyway, So between that and also just wanting to make sure that I get my time in on my character for Diablo 4 before the next season, which is going to be shorter because the expansion's coming out. So yeah, I think I'm shifting priorities. But anyway, I think Terrace Land is off the list now. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was nice to kind of get back into an MMO and be a pure healer. I love playing healers, so I had a good time with it. But I think I've done what I wanted to do. So right now, really all I'm kind of sticking with, like I said, is trying to get some more time in on FF14, just blasting through stuff with my Summon Mancer on Diablo 4. And that's about it. What about you, Chris? What's keeping you busy?
Well, I just want to say that through some discords, I was inspired by Matt's choice to play Sonic Adventure, and I beat it.
Nice.
I'm just going to say this now because we are talking about Sonic Adventure later this year as part of the Dreamcast's 25th year anniversary. That Sonic Adventure is a good game. Get over it.
Yep.
Ooh, hot takes.
It's a good game. Are there bad? Is it a flawed game?
Yeah.
Yes. Is it a perfect game? No. But is it a fun game? Yes. It is a fun, good game. I'll just say good. It's good. I'll talk more about that later this year, as I just said, because we are doing an episode on that there. But just to let you know, I had a good time. I appreciated it. I enjoyed it. So there, if you don't remember I said that in a few months, then well, I guess there's the preview of that episode. So keep you in anticipation, I guess. I also played a little bit of Gran Turismo 2. I just busted that out and I decided I was going to play that. And it was a really good time. I thought I was only going to play it for like 1 or 2 hours, and then 4 hours went by and I was like, shit. I was playing this for a little bit longer than I wanted to, and I didn't get anywhere. I just kept on doing the same Sunday Cup race over and over and over again. But it's like RPG grinding. You get in that cathartic kind of routine that you get the money. It's awesome. You beat a race, you improve your car, see if you can beat the race by a little bit more. It's kind of like a dungeon crawler, Shane. I think you should get into Gran Turismo.
I will take your advice under consideration. Thank you.
Shane is over there cutting back. He's like, I'm cutting back on video games. Let me list a bunch of MMOs. That's like quitting cigarettes and going to heroin.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I quit cigarettes. Now I'm just doing black tar heroin.
I'm playing some of the longest games in existence, and I can make fun of Shane because I also am a 14 sicko, though I haven't played lately, but I bought all the expansions. I got to Heaven's Word and then fell off just due to other stuff. But like the irony in saying I'm cutting back, I'm playing these gigantic ongoing games is very funny.
Well, okay. Yes, I recognize that. However, it's going from juggling like half a dozen games that are like live services trying to get me to do dailies to like one,
Okay.
one or two. Like Diablo 4 doesn't really have like dailies, which thank God, and I hope they never do. And I am assuming that FF14 does, but I just don't pay attention. So there you go.
Well, I'm glad you're back on that Final Fantasy 14 train. I was about to say Final Fantasy 4 train, which would not make sense. It's a game I love. I think it's time to do some brief historying, Shane. What do you think?
I mean, I guess. I suppose that's what the people want. They come here for book learning, I'm told.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the people do want this because this is a Patreon poll winner, as I briefly mentioned when I was talking to Matt.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember who nominated.
Yeah,
Do you remember,
who
Tony?
the hell would nominate that? That's weird. Like they picked this game to nominate. What kind of sicko, Yeah, you'd have to be a real fucking loser to nominate Chrono Trigger. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, come on.
It was him. It was Tony. Yeah.
This time.
Can't be any worse than somebody trying to nominate Persona 4.
You're the one who doesn't want to play Persona 4. I wouldn't be talking about it like that. You might encourage people to now vote for it.
It's true.
I mean, maybe. Listen, I have already come to terms with the fact that it is an inevitability. So at this, I'm just going to have fun with it. Why not poke the bear? If you know you're eventually going to get mauled, no matter what you do, then you might as well just be antagonistic. That's my take.
C'est la vie.
so much for cutting back.
Yeah. You go out on your own terms.
That's right. But at any rate, I suppose we probably should move things along. So, Chris, how about you give the fine people at home a little bit of education about this here Chrono Trigger.
If you're over the age of 35 and living in the United States, when you hear the term Dream Team, you might think of Michael Jordan leading the 1992 men's U.S. Olympic basketball team to winning the gold medal without even a chance of resistance. Writing this, that's what I certainly think about it when the term is mentioned, as this was no doubt an iconic cultural moment for any young child who wanted to be like Mike. You could safely assume that when we say Dream Team in the context of this episode, no balls of any kind will be referenced, basket or otherwise. No, we're talking about a team that would be assembled to create a game that, at the time, would have been thought of as impossible. Two rival companies that were unquestionably the largest in their fields of development, role-playing games, would have creators under their umbrella come together to make the ultimate video game. That game would be Chrono Trigger. The story starts in 1992 when Hironobu Sakaguchi, creator of Final Fantasy, Yuji Horii, creator of Dragon Quest, and renowned artist Akira Toriyama met up while on travel in the United States. With a suggestion from Kazuhiko Torishima, the three would decide to start a project that would be a combination of the two legendary aforementioned series. After Enix agreed to lend Horii to Square to create the project, it would start development in earnest in 1993. The project would initially start out as a second entry in the Mana series, even going so far as giving the working title of what would become Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger. Obviously, that did not happen, and that name was assigned to be a brand new idea for the game that we are talking about today. The idea of time travel, game central mechanic, and theming was even initially rejected until Yuji Horii picked it up with assistance from Toriyama. The game would also be initially developed for the planned Super Famicom Disk System, or PlayStation, which was infamously scrapped. This would mean that the development would move towards cartridge instead of CD, and increase the memory from a 24 megabit cartridge to 32 megabit later in development. Development would have its ebbs and flows, of course, especially since Square and Enix had members of their own team involved in the development of their keystone franchises, mostly on the side of Square with Final Fantasy VI, which released in March of 1994. And while not officially stated, one could assume that Dragon Quest VI was delayed until December of 1995 due to work on Chrono Trigger. But once Final Fantasy VI had ended production, staff would be rolled over into Chrono Trigger to get it on the path towards completion. And on March 11th, 1995, Chrono Trigger would see release for the Super Famicom in Japan, developed and published by Square, with the North American release arriving 5 months later to the date on August 11th. In Japan, the game was unsurprisingly a huge hit, selling 2 million units in 2 months and only selling behind Dragon Quest VI for the year. All in all, Japan would see the sale of approximately 2.4 million units sold. Also unsurprisingly, the game did not sell that well in North America, but still a success for a game in the genre, topping out at around 250,000 units. In the end, the game's total sales made it the 17th best-selling game for the Super Nintendo, behind Dragon Quest V and ahead of Final Fantasy V. Critically, the game was very well received, securing a 96 in aggregate from reviewers. It also received multiple accolades from publications, such as the Best RPG of the Year from GamePro and EGM, as well as Best Super Nintendo Game of the Year from EGM and Nintendo Power. Chrono Trigger would receive a follow-on game of sorts in 1996 for the Super Famicom's Satellaview that would remain Japanese exclusive until 2022. It would also receive a sequel, mostly in name only, in 1999, 2000 in North America, with Chrono Cross. Chrono Trigger itself would also be released on multiple different platforms, including the PlayStation in 1999 in Japan, 2001 in North America, the Nintendo DS in 2008, mobile in 2011, and PC in 2018. These versions would include fully animated scenes in Toriyama's style as well. To conclude, there's little doubt that Chrono Trigger is one of the biggest and most respected games in Square's historic library. There are a host of familiar names that would find success across the industry, particularly with JRPGs attached to it, many of which I did not name here. For many, this game is not only considered to be the best JRPG on the Super Nintendo, but the best game, period. So now, it's our turn to ask, has Chrono Trigger stood the test of time? And that is your brief history of Chrono Trigger.
Thank you, Chris, for that thorough yet succinct history.
There's so many more things I could have said. Like, the names that are attached to this game are insane. Like, if it's a name at Squaresoft in the past, like if you know a name at Squaresoft, they were probably attached to this game in some form or fashion, one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
The only one that was originally supposed to be, I don't know how well you all know your music composers, Kenji Ito, who also composes for the Saga series primarily. He was attached to the project initially. It was supposed to be Uematsu and Ito, but then they gave the ball to Mitsuda, and of course we have the soundtrack that we do today. But that was initially part of their planning, to have like that dream team come on. So it was Uematsu and Ito that were going to write the music, and they just kind of diverted at that point, which I don't know if many people know, but there's a story about Mitsuda. He was kind of like, hey, if you don't give me something to work on, I'm out. Sakaguchi was like, okay, just write the music for this entire game. Uematsu's kind of busy right now. This will work out for you. And the rest is mostly history.
It really is the dream team as far as JRPGs. Like, these are all the big names. These are the legends.
Yeah.
And they all kind of came together. And then there's a guy that wrote and created DPZ.
Yeah.
Like, you even got that guy coming in. Jesus Christ. He was probably even on the game at this point. I mean, everybody else is.
Yeah, it's one of those things that at the time when I played it, I don't know that I really understood that. But for sure, now looking back at it, like, Yasunori Mitsuda is one of the most prolific composers ever, but was a no-name around this time. And it's kind of incredible to look at this in a vacuum and be like, wow. Like, a lot of these folks were legends, but there were even folks who weren't at the time, but like you said, Chris, now are. Like, all of those folks have either gone on to continue to work at Square Enix or work at other famous RPG making studios outside of that in other parts of Japan as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of them, like, even were kind of big at that time as well. I don't have the producer's name in front of me at the moment, but they were more attached to games that you probably wouldn't look back at now and be like, oh, that's a big Square hit. But at that time, for Square, these were very notable games. So even if you don't recognize their name now, they were like, everybody that was involved with this for the most part had a heavy hand, or at least some hand, in making some of other Square's other RPGs during that era. And they were, along with Enix, rulers of the RPG kingdom. You know, that was just who they were. So it makes sense. But we're going to roll into our personal experiences here. Matt, I'm going to save you for last, because I know this is your favorite game of all time. But we'll start out with a guest. And I also know that you love this game as well, Tony. So why don't you give us your personal experience with Chrono Trigger?
So I pretty much played, I think, almost every version of this, minus the DS version, because I was a little past my point. But I think I have somewhere the original cartridge. I don't know where it is, but I know I had it at one point. I started out with the cartridge on the Super NES, and I was kind of like, all right, whatever. And then it came out on PlayStation. By that time, I was full JRPG nerd mode. So I think I got every ending before there was trophies. So if you know anything about me, I'm a trophy whore. And I will go after every single trophy if I can, and it's reasonable. So I did that like back in the day before there was anything. So I beat everything on the PlayStation. For this version, I did the PC and I got every ending. I mean, I have nothing but fond memories. I think this is kind of like JRPG Gold to a point because of the way the characters interact. And that was kind of like something that I really hadn't seen before. So I have pretty positive, youthful memories of this game.
Mm-hmm. How about yourself, Shane? I actually don't know what you have.
Well, prepare to be disappointed.
Oh.
No, I really don't have any like early experience with this game. I never had it on my Super Nintendo. I really wasn't into, honestly, like any RPGs at that time. I didn't really get into the RPG groove until like a bit later in life. I think Diablo was sort of my gateway into the RPG space. It's a good one because it's an action RPG, so there's not a ton of like crunchy systems that you have to deal with or anything like that. So I think it's a good entry point. And then from there, you know, you go down the rabbit hole to like Baldur's Gate, and then eventually you end up in Weebtown, USA, and start talking this shit, right? And then you become Chris. So
True.
I am trying to remember. I don't think I played like legit played Chrono Trigger until I got the DS version. And even then I didn't get that when it came out. So I think my first crack at Chrono Trigger was probably within the last 10 years. I'm fairly certain that that's accurate. And also I know this because when I fired up my 3DS to play this again for the show, my old save file was there. I also did not finish that first playthrough. So up until now, I had never actually experienced the entirety of Chrono Trigger. I got up until the point where you get Frog the Masamune sword, and that was where I stopped. So
The Masamune.
whatever. Masamune. Anyway, so that's where I stopped the first time around. I don't know why, but at any rate, that's sort of the extent of my personal experience. Not terribly exciting. That's why we leave the better ones for last.
Yes. I mean, not saying there's anything wrong with yours, Tony. I just wanted to get the good guest intro out of the way.
That's fair.
I'm trying to throw shit at you.
Wait, Tony's the good guest? What does that make me?
It's like an Oreo cookie sandwich. You know, it's the sandwich method. You do good,
Yeah.
you do bad, and then you do good, right?
A nice save. Nice save.
Yeah.
All right, well said.
Yeah.
Am I getting cream filled later, or is that like
I guess this leads it into me. I don't remember when exactly I got this game. I remember I've talked about these New Year's parties I went to every year when I was a kid up in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and they had the game. I think this had to be in Christmas of '95 because I think it was relatively new at the time. I had not even heard of it. Even though I was into RPGs, I was into Square RPGs, but for some reason I'd just not heard of Chrono Trigger, and I was told, oh, this game is really good. So I don't know if it was lent to me or if I ended up getting it for my birthday from Funkoland not long after I saw the game, because I was really into it. It's like, oh, wow, like it looks really good. I love the animation here. It looks a lot different than Final Fantasy. Like they're not little tiny pixelated people. They're actually more fully formed, and it looks cool. It was special. I think you can assume at this point, like this game really took off with me, and I absolutely loved it. I played this game so much. Now that we all know, like this game has New Game Plus, I don't think that's a secret. And by the way, I'm just going to say, like the spoiler warning has been released, so we can get to story. No one hold back. Say whatever you want to. This is your warning as well, listener. Plenty of time to get out of here if you don't want to hear any spoilers, but not holding back on any spoilers. I'm not going to say anything here, but once we get to the story, yes. But this game has New Game Plus. And even think when I got the game from Funkoland, it came with New Game Plus. So I just started New Game Plus with one of the files on there. That was my first playthrough. Was just ripping through it with no difficulty whatsoever. So that was nice. Eventually I ended up beating it the good old fashioned way. Also fell in love with it there. But I remember I beat this game so much. I played this game so much that I would keep getting all the speed capsules and magic capsules and strength capsules until every single character was level star with star stats. I have pumped hours and hours and hours into this game. Now, I don't have an original cartridge anymore. That's no longer part of my collection. I do have a PlayStation version now. I also had that as a kid. I think I imported it actually, just so I could get those videos early, because what you could do with those old PlayStation Game Sharks is you could put it into the back of your PlayStation and then it would boot up and you could watch the movies that were on the disc. And so I just wanted to see the new animated cutscenes and how awesome they were, because the PlayStation version of this game is not awesome, but those animated cutscenes are awesome. So I wanted to make sure I could watch those. Also secured a DS version. I secured that a couple of years ago at, I don't want to say hefty price, but kind of the price it was going for at the time, which was a little bit more than MSRP because the game has gone up in price, much like any other physical version of this game, except the PlayStation one for aforementioned reasons. This is one of those games that I do adore. I know I say that for quite a few games, but this is also one of them. Chrono Trigger is a special game to me. I love this game. I think I've mentioned this on mentioned it on the podcast, like top favorite games or retro games or Super Nintendo games. I think this has been at the top of my Super Nintendo game list, so we already know how this episode is going to end for me, but that's where I'm at with that. With that being said, Matt, this is your favorite game of all time. What is your personal experience with this game?
So buckle in, it's story time, kids.
Woo!
Growing up, I was a huge DBZ fan. Started watching when it came to America, so I was a little bit behind from what like the actual official Japanese releases were. But when they released the Arrival movie, which was like the first handful of episodes as a single standalone movie, and then the first like run of Saiyan Saga, I watched all of those, and so I watched it obsessively and made a lot of friends who also liked anime and was like kind of getting me into it. And one of my friends, my friend Roy, who's Filipino and who was deep in anime culture and knew a lot before I did and introduced me to a lot of stuff. When we were growing up, we hung out at his grandmother's house all the time, would have lunch, hang out, play games. And one day he found out that I loved Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, but had never played Chrono Trigger. And he's like, "Do you know what this is?" I said, I don't. He's like, "It's an RPG. What's that?" Oh, Matt. And so he's like, "Here's my Super Nintendo cartridge. I know you just got a Super Nintendo. I got mine pretty late. I got the Square Super Nintendo. I think that came out in 98 or 99, maybe a little earlier. Yeah. But it was the last run of Super Nintendos. And he's like, take this home and play it. You'll thank me." And I proceeded to play it, I think, for 8 hours straight that day I brought it home. I became obsessed with it. I brought it back to him and, of course, then went out and bought my own cartridge, which I would eventually sell later on. We'll come back to that. But I played it all the time. Like, and this was back at a time when, I got games, a good amount of games. I was, my parents were pretty good about getting me a couple games every so often, and I was pretty fortunate with that. But every game I got, I would finish that game and be like, all right, I'm bored. I'm going to go back to Chrono Trigger and just beat that again. Got all the endings back before we could easily track them. And then, kept playing it, and then eventually wanted to get a PlayStation and some other consoles. So I sold all my classic retro games, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, which I regret now. But lucky for me, Chrono Trigger came to the PlayStation not long after that. And so, of course, I bought that copy, played the hell out of that. Like, and people complain about the long load times, which were awful. But at the time, I did not care. I just wanted to play this game constantly. I loved the animated cutscenes, the new scenes that they added to connect it more strongly to Chrono Cross and all of that, and became obsessed. And then eventually sold my PlayStation and all my PlayStation games so I could get the next console, whatever it was. Then down the line, when the DS came out and they said, hey, we're going to re-release the PlayStation version, but as a DS cartridge, I got that and played it obsessively again. And this one had a way to track the endings you found and some other little achievement stuff. That version, I'm no fool, I kept and still have to this day in my 3DS. It's my go-to version of Chrono Trigger to play most of the time. Played that obsessively. And it got to a point where I played this game when it came out on the DS, I think at least once a year for a decade. And that's not even including all the times I played it as a kid. Like, it was just every year, like during a winter break or summer break, I would just blow through the game. Not all the endings, but at least one ending. And then, of course, when it came out on PC, I picked it up also just so I could complete the gamut. It wasn't until I think last year or 2 years ago, having a particularly rough year, and my friend Frankie, my co-host on Reignite, was going through her dad's stuff. Her dad had passed away and had a lot of old retro stuff. And she sent me a photo. She's like, I found this. I think you want it. And she found an inbox with instruction manual copy of Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo. He said,
damn.
and they told me, I know this means the world to you. I like it well enough, but I will not play it. Do you want it? And so next time I saw them, they gave it to me, and I still have it. It sits on my mantle up here somewhere. So I currently own the Steam version, which is actually much better now. They added a lot of improvements to it. The DS version and the Super Nintendo version. The only physical version of this game I do not have is the cheapest and easiest version to get. So eventually I will buy that just to have them all. Something I forgot to mention was when I got Chrono Trigger on Super Nintendo and became obsessed with it, I also wanted the soundtrack. That wasn't available in the States. We had a little thing called eBay, which is still around. So I went on eBay to buy it. I paid probably too much money, but I got a Japanese import with a handwritten list of the tracks in English because like there was no paperwork with it. It was the disc in a jewel case. And I still have that. I still have the soundtrack. And so, yeah, this is when I say it's my favorite game of all time, it's like number one with a bullet. Nothing comes close. Chrono Trigger is my favorite game of all time. I try not to say the best game of all time because I think that stuff is always objective, right? There is no true best game of all time, but this is one of them to me. And it's definitely my favorite without a doubt. It ebbs and flows with Mass Effect and a few other things, but for the most part, this is number one with a bullet, my favorite game of all time. And for this episode, I didn't complete another new playthrough, but I did get pretty far in on a playthrough on the Steam Deck. And I was very impressed with the improvements to the PC version because it was trash in 2018 when it came out. Because it was essentially the mobile port, which is not great. But they added, when they started doing the pixel remasters and like working towards that, they added a bunch of improvements to Chrono Trigger on Steam. And it runs great on the Steam Deck, looks great on the Steam Deck. And so I played quite a bit of it there. And yeah, I think I may, like lowballing, I've probably finished this game 50 times. And I think I'm really lowballing there. Considering I, like I said, used to play it every year and I'm in my early 40s. So yeah, that is my not so brief early history with Chrono Trigger.
So, hey, Chris, can we just like skip the does it hold up portion of the episode then?
No, we still got to keep it.
Okay, fine.
I'm sure the audience will be surprised. I'm just going to say no to throw them all off. Or will I? You gotta
never know.
There's only one real wild card, and that's Shane. I think the three of us are pretty much on the same side.
Yeah, it's trash. Just throw it out. Just don't even play this. Just
Garbage. Never play it.
Total horrendousness. That was a great personal experience that you gave us there, Matt, which does segue well into, because I say it segues well into plot and writing. And as I already mentioned, the spoiler wall does not exist. I'm not saying we're going to spoil stuff because that's not really the route we take out the show, but I'm going to let everyone talk about whatever they want to with the plot. Spoilers be damned. So don't even say, hey, spoiler. Don't worry about that. If you're listening to this and you don't want to be spoiled, I have no idea how long this is going to go. So my recommendation would just be go play the game first and then come back if you don't want to be spoiled. I'll just say that. Or else just 30 minutes. If we're still talking about it, oh, well, I can't gauge this. But just to provide a little bit of a primer of what Chrono Trigger is about, you are a boy whose default name is Chrono. You can name all of your characters, by the way. And you are woken up by your mother, and you are told it's time to go to the millennial fair that's happening in your little town for 1,000 years of the kingdom of Guardia. And so you want to head up there and support your pal Luca, who is making some sort of device that you're not too aware of quite yet, but you're known that it's supposed to be special, and she is your friend, so you're going to go support her. So you go and head up to the fair. You run into a girl who crashes into you, drops her pendant that falls off. You go grab that, get introduced to her, run around the fair for a bit, and then you go see Luca. And then she built this teleportation device. You get in the teleportation device. It works really well. Then your new friend, she decides that she's going to get in the teleportation device. It does not work so well, and she gets thrown into a portal. So you, being the absolutely brave person that you are, decide to jump into the teleporter and follow her, which leads you into a world that you're unfamiliar with, but is also familiar. Hint, it's time travel. And then your entire adventure begins with a story through time to find and defeat the evil Lavos, who arrived sometime 65 million years in the past. How that happened, we might get into that. We might not. We're just talking more about how this plot and game develops. So, Shane, through your playthrough, I'll start out with you, just because you haven't had a lot of time really to get into these kind of things quite yet. What was your thought about the plot and the writing?
Well, so I feel like I should throw the initial caveat out that given that I played the DS version, I am told that the script was revised for that, so I may not be able to speak to the original quite so much. But all in all, I really dug it. I think from like a dialogue perspective, it doesn't. How do I phrase this? I'm usually a sucker for like good humor in scripts. I don't feel like this had a ton necessarily. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's the first thing that usually sticks out to me. Like, I think the interactions between the characters, especially given that you can choose who's in your party for a vast majority of the game, with some like plot critical moments notwithstanding, that's just like one small thing that would potentially incentivize you to play the game over again, just to see what other party combinations have to say in certain events throughout the game. So by and large, I thought the dialogue was pretty well written. The overall plot, for the most part, I think I enjoyed. It does get to a point in sort of like the, not even gonna say back half, I'm thinking more like the back third-ish of the game, where it does start to encroach into that like really confusing JRPG bullshit territory.
Oh.
But I think the big reason for that is because of like all of the time hopping and how all of those things are like interrelated. And so I'm not saying it's nonsensical. I want to be clear about that, because that is one of the issues that I have with a lot of other games that try to like be up their own ass and be like, look how insightful and complicated we are. This doesn't do that. At least I don't think so. It is a little complicated the further you get in, because things you can keep track pretty well, right? Like for a pretty good chunk of the game, even with the different time periods, you're like, okay, I get where this is coming from. I get how these things are related. But as they layer on a little bit more, and you start having even more time periods that you jump to, like the 12,000 BC and like a couple other ones, they start, for me, and this is of course purely subjective, but for me, I had a little bit of trouble with that, where I started to kind of lose the thread, because there were just so many different things that were sort of like interrelated, that I almost feel like I needed to start writing some things down, because I kept forgetting like, okay, wait, how did this happen? Or like, why did this come from here to like here, and doing something in this time, like change this thing, and this person is actually this person. And it got close to that territory of just being like, okay, this is like complicated for the sake of being complicated. But I don't think it ever really got too like heinous, which is good, because I think had it tried to do more, I think it would have lost me completely. But the thing is time travel is always a very like touchy thing, right? Like it's really hard to do that well. In a lot of cases, like time travel is a very like jump the shark moment for a lot of like TV shows or whatever, where as soon as they hit that point, it's almost like a beacon of like, oh, the writers have run out of ideas, so let's do time travel. But I think overall this game handled it pretty well. I mean, you're still going to have some of those like time travel paradoxes, but whatever. For the most part, I think it was fairly straightforward. But yeah, I think that's my general assessment. It skirted the line, I'm going to say, of being maybe a little bit too much of like a spaghetti of like plot threads or like interrelated things, but I think it pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah, interesting, because I didn't pick up on that really in the last third. So maybe when we go more around the table here, you can get more into that, because I didn't really feel that. So I'm interested in you feeling that way in that last third of the game, honestly. Tony, what were your thoughts?
So, I mean, most of us have beaten this like countless amounts of times. So
yeah,
plot is, we just know the plot, or we know what to do with the chest. Like oh, I gotta say no to these chests because then I get the better item later. So I think that stuff could be convoluted to somebody that's never played it before. I could kind
Sure.
of see where he's coming from with that. But for me, and playing a bunch of bad time travel games, I think this game, replaying it, I was really impressed with the simplicity of the story and the ability for them to convey that story. Now, I'm kind of nitpicky about like the prehistoric. I think it's like 32 million years ago.
65 million BC.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
it's even worse. I fucking
Yeah.
hate that part. That's like the timeline, like 65 million years ago. Like, what the fuck is that? And then everything else is
And
like within
everybody's speaking broken English.
yeah, like so nobody advanced to like, I don't know, 2,000 years before the story starts with Chrono. Like that doesn't make any fucking sense. So that's like my one gripe with the time travel is the prehistoric era. But other than that, I mean, I really enjoy the simplicity of the time travel story. I don't think they tried to overcomplicate it with bullshit or make it
Mhm.
too like convoluted, in my opinion. But also, I've beaten the game probably like 50, 60 times. So it's not going to be complicated to me because I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember this part.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I feel what you're putting down right now. So, yeah, again, like when we do this roundtable, that's why I'm more curious. I see where we can get with that. And maybe, yeah, we'll just swing back over to you too later on, Shane, so to get more specific. But Matt, what did you think?
I mean, along with Tony, like, yeah, I mean, I've played it so many times. I am osmose the story at this point. I will say that the only reason I don't have issues with the timeline is because people think this is Earth, but it's not Earth. It's Earth-like, but like we don't know how long this planet's been around. We don't know how long these ages have lasted. If we base them on what the planet Earth sort of went through, then I can see that. But because it's a fantasy planet with a fantasy timeline, I don't really think that hard about it. Yes, if you can compare it to like Earth's prehistoric period and the numbers, it's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But that said, I have to agree, like you already mentioned it, but like the fact that mechanically the time travel plays into the game and you get certain things depending on when you grab them and how good they are. I love that. I think it's the only video game to really do that. There might be others, but it's definitely not a common thing. Time travel is a common trope, but like mechanically working it in to the items you get, and like we're gonna during this part, I want to talk about one of my favorite side quests because it's not even part of the main plot, but it's one of the most brilliant uses of the timeline. So throughout the story, you go to these different places. You go to the far-flung future. You meet a robot named Robo, or you can name him whatever you want, whose personal theme sounds very much like Never Gonna Give You Up, which I love.
Thank
that.
you. I'm so glad I wasn't the only one that thought that.
Oh, it's not an accident, Shane. It's like people have compared it. Like, I don't know if it was a direct influence or like happenstance, but like they are very close. When you get Robo, he obviously is a robot and comes along with you on your adventure. At one point, you go back to the present day and there's this sunken desert. Like this whole forested area had fallen to shit. Monsters had taken over. And there's a young woman there named Fiona who lives there, who's trying to tend to it, but like can't really fix it. You're in the like medieval times. And so when you talk to her about it, she's like, yeah, I really wish I had someone who could help me. And so after a long conversation, you talk to Robo and he says, well, I can do this. I can stay and I want to do it. For me, it'll be a long time, but I'm a robot. For you guys, it'll be a quick jump. You can jump to the future. I'll be there. I'll see you and I can help her fix this. And so then you go back into the present day and you find a shrine to Robo, but it's actually Robo on a pedestal, just covered in vines and soot, and you revive him. And then you get this incredible campfire scene that's like kind of pivotal to like conversations about the characters. But like the fact that you can develop the story that way by literally leaving a character behind and then jumping forward, like, and then hearing his stories of what it was like and how hard he worked and he's glad he got to do it and have this purpose. Like, I love that. And this game has many moments like that. There is a moment with my favorite character, Magus, that's like jaw-dropping once you understand it. When you get to the Sky Age, which I won't get too much into right now. Also, like with Magus, Magus starts as a villain and becomes an ally. And the arc to that, there's choices. And being such a super fan of the Mass Effect franchise, it's what launched Reignite, which is now a Dragon Age podcast, and loving the choice in that. all of that is born from my love of the narrative devices in this game. And while I can't disagree with Shane and any first time player going, oh, some of this might be convoluted, or I didn't know I had to do that, because the game doesn't hold your hand in every spot. But I think it's a learning experience. Like, I got the worst versions of those items the first time I played through because the narrative doesn't really tell you. And then I learned and was like, oh, I have to do this. I think the story is masterfully told in those small moments. The larger moments, you know, I think I love, but I can understand why people would take or leave. But it's those smaller moments that are affected by time travel. There's a side quest with a Luca that's really pivotal and really heartbreaking that I don't even want to get into that. Like, those moments are why I love this story. I could focus on the bigger narrative, but I think at this point I've talked about that enough in enough places, and you can find that in enough places. I think it's focusing on these small moments and side quests. Ozzy's castle, when you go back with Magus, like, those are all these side quests that you can completely miss, are just as important narratively as the main story. And I really love that about this game.
So that scene you're talking about with Luca, is that the one after you get the Fiona Temple done, when you're in that campfire?
Yeah.
It can be heartbreaking, or it can be like something really cool.
Yeah.
And it's really up to the player to take contextual cues in order to make those choices and figure it out, because you don't have a lot of time to figure that out. If you've never done that before, you're probably going to do like I did the first time I encountered it and fail.
Right.
And that it is heartbreaking. And it's kind of like that Doctor Who belief that, you know, there are set points in time you can't change.
Right.
And
yeah,
that was one of the things, like, I thought I put it incorrectly. And it didn't happen. So it's like, maybe the game is telling me that this has to happen. And there are sometimes fixed points in time that you can't do anything about, but that's not the case. So that's a really cool scene. And that entire side quest, I agree with you. I think it's great. But when it comes to the actual storytelling, I think that this is the element of the game that when people say that this is Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, that shines a light on that concept the best. This is a Yuji Horii story. This is a Dragon Quest story in terms of its whimsy, its lightheartedness, its levity, but also has moments, serious moments of inflection where you can be like, hey, like, the gravity here is something I need to be taking a little bit more seriously, even though the presentation is very fun and bubbly. There are scenes like they're all over the place, but like we just mentioned with Luca, that scene being a side quest, what happens with Chrono and getting Chrono back into your party.
Frog's whole story.
Yeah. Frog's arc when he gets the Masamune, but when I was a kid it was the Masamune, so I can understand. That's why I said that earlier. But when you get the Masamune and you go and hunt down Magus and just everything that goes around with that, I actually think that the animated cutscene kind of breaks up the momentum of that scene. As awesome as that animated cutscene is, it's just that entire scene is just masterfully crafted for a 16-bit game. But when it comes to the writing, yes, this has the Yuji Horii elements of being more lighthearted and while also telling a great story, but it has the Final Fantasy element, particularly probably from the mindset of Final Fantasy VI, that once you get into a certain point of the game, all bets are off and it becomes nonlinear, and you can go do whatever you want to flesh out your characters' arcs and stories. And that is a Final Fantasy VI thing. There's also the Final Fantasy VI aspect of making things needlessly complicated for complicated sakes, I feel, which is kind of what Final Fantasy would do at the end of all the Final Fantasy games. So I can kind of understand where you're coming from in that aspect, Shane, if that's what you're talking about. And it does kind of get to the more typical, like, anime kind of storytelling once you get into 12,000 BC and the whole entire Ocean Palace and it becoming the Queen Zeal and what's it called? It's the Black Omen that it becomes in the sky.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that happens. And I can understand, like, that happens very fast. But I also think when you really look back and you look at the time it takes to play this game, all of it takes place very fast. It's just the pacing, particularly in the beginning of the game, is just utterly fantastic. It's some of the best pacing in any JRPG ever made. So much happens in a short amount of time, and it feels like it took place over a longer period of time, not in a bad way, but in a good way. Like, there's so many things you can tell and so many things you can talk about. And then you look at your game clock and you're like, 6 hours. I thought I was playing that for like 50. No, like it's been 6 hours and there's all this information there, but in the good way, not like, oh, it's the dregs. No, absolutely not. And it's also like overall a short game. Now I know what I'm doing. I've played this so many times. I know where to go and what to do. But even that being said, I think I beat it in under 17 hours. And that's doing all the side quests and getting all the items and doing everything that there is to do. So it respects your time as well. And this was right before the era where people would get all upset and be like, your game's not 50 hours. Is it really a game, bro? Like, yeah, this is why it's so great, is because it delivers on those points and it does so effectively. And it does. And because it's a Yuji Horii game, the overall plot is not needlessly complicated, even though there is sprinkles of those elements at some places. Also, time paradoxes abound, but this is an anime game. That's another way I want to look at it. This is a fun anime game, and it's supposed to be fun, and it wants the players to know that they are having fun, even if they do to get into some more heavier content. And that's fine. 65 million BC is more of just like, you get the point. This happened a long time ago. Like, the year number doesn't really matter. It's just trying to say this happened really far in the past. This is when cavemen ruled. So whatever. And then 12,000 BC is also just to inform the player. Yeah, this also happened a long time ago. And that's why probably people forgot about it. And that would explain what happened to the world with the tidal wave and everything going underwater. And it kind of developed like what would happen over like another 10,000 years. So I get it. It doesn't really bother me. I think that the years are just more placeholders to be representative of how time flowed rather than having any real significance to it. So if I think when you view it from that aspect, I don't think it's that much of a problem at all.
Well, the 65 million years ago bothers me, but I think in the context, it's just trying to show like, oh, it's this pre-human time period, or not even pre-human, because humans became the dominant series. And I think what this game does really well is a simple storytelling in 20 hours. Like, okay, we see how humans became the dominant. We see where Lavos arrived on Earth, or whatever the world's called in that game. But there's so many elements to this game that you see like these pivotal world events to see how you got to the future and what created them, and even what created like beyond the future, why the future got all fucked up. So I think they did it so well, and it's such great storytelling in a 20-hour game.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's impactful. Like, I don't think there's many games out there that can tell a story like this in 20 hours. Does it rely on some tropes? Yeah, but I think the tropes help enhance the story because you don't have to think too much about it. Like, oh, she's got glasses and a wrench. She's a nerdy girl. But it serves a purpose in the story. And it's so cool to see how concise it can be while still touching these depths, like Luca's mom. There's so many. Frog Story is really great with it. The Robot 5 future thing that kind of went on, that was kind of a weird one. But like humans being present, how magic got brought to the people in the future from the 12,000 BC disaster. Like, it's so cool to see how these moments seem like really bleak and instant are affected later in the future. And I think that's one of the coolest elements of this game is the storytelling through time travel. And it's not overdone, blown out like a lot of other games or other animes or other books in general.
Absolutely. Shane?
So I don't disagree with a single thing that anybody has said. I very much enjoy how they tie the different time periods together, especially earlier on, like when you start doing the time period jumping to kind of like reassemble the sword and having to go back and grab the Dreamstone and bringing that forward to Melchior and have him like reassemble it. And then that was all. I was like, this is fucking awesome. Like, I was totally digging that. That doesn't necessarily change. Like, I think you guys are right in that it is handled pretty well. I think what I'm getting at when I say that it kind of skirts the line of being maybe a little too complicated, and again, this is just me, but the briefest moment, I had a thought after the first, when you fight Magus, right, when he's about to try to summon Lavos, where for a moment I thought that maybe that was the end of the game. Just maybe, because like I hadn't ever gotten that far. Like I said earlier, my first save file was when I got Frog the Sword, and then I never made it past that point. So this was all new territory for me. And it's one of those things, and I've said this a couple of times in different games we've played as well, where it feels almost like a natural conclusion. And, Okami, this is the thing that bothered me about Okami, where it was like, this is a clear, like, natural conclusion to a storyline. And then they're like, but fuck you, here's like 20 more hours of game. Now, I'm not saying this game has that much more, but for a moment, it kind of felt that way. And so I was initially a little salty where I'm just like, oh, fuck you. Like, what are we doing now? Like, I had a very clear vision of what was going on in this game. And now you're telling me like, no, Lavos is not like some sort of like weird demon creature or something that's being summoned. Like you know what? I will accept that. Just fucking carte blanche, whatever. Like, sure, summoning demons. Got it. All right, cool. They're like, no, it's an extraterrestrial that came here millions of years ago and have been living inside of the core of the planet. And then also let's go and blow out all these other storylines, which again, not bad. I'm not saying that's bad. I think I just went into it with a different expectation. And I think that's kind of what threw me a little bit, where it was just like, okay, I have this pretty clear idea of what's happening, even with the different time periods. And then kind of to your point, Chris, where it very much opens up at that point, which again, not inherently bad. I think I came into it with like a different sort of like preconceived notion, I guess. And so I think that's what threw me. The other part of it is playing the DS version, they add other shit, right? So like, and I think that sort of complicates things a little bit more for me, like the Lost Sanctum area, and then like the sort of like aftermath section, like once you've reached what was the end of the game. I think more specifically the Lost Sanctum one, it just adds this other thing, which again, if you've played the game before, like you guys have, when this came out on the DS, it's a neat little extra treat because you're like, oh, there's more game to play. That's cool. But I think as someone going into it for the first time, that's just like more stuff that gets piled on top of it. And I don't know if that's necessarily like beneficial. So does that all make sense? Like, I'm not saying that it's bad at all. Like I actually really enjoyed the story. I loved how the different time periods interact, how you can affect the later time periods by doing something in previous ones, like the specific story arcs with the different characters, like the mother brain thing with Robo. And I love all of that. It's just that I think a big part of it was just how I went into it expecting one thing and then finding that there's like way more layers to it. It's like you guys can go back and talk about this without even thinking about it because you've played it so many times. You're like, yeah, this happened and this happened and I remember all of it. But if you're playing it for the first time, like getting towards the end of the game and then sitting and talking to someone and be like, okay, so what happened? For me, I'm going to sit there and be like, I don't remember all of it because there were a lot of things that happened in the last 20 hours and I don't quite recall how we got here. So I guess that's really it.
I mean, I think it's a game designed to be consumed multiple times, right? Like we haven't even stated there are 15 endings, one bad and 14 additional ones. There's only one clear bad ending, game over ending. And I think, yeah, you're not supposed to pull it like because you only got the one ending unless you did play it multiple times. And even still, it's designed to be that way. And like, I totally see that perspective, but also you got the intended result the whole way up to that Magus fight. Like they are waiting to bait and switch you. Like that's the whole point of that arc with Frog. And so that's what you got. And so your natural reaction of like, hey, what the fuck is kind of intended. And so I kind of actually really enjoy that that's how you took it. And then you were still excited to play this other stuff because you enjoyed it. I like that they kind of got you hook, line, and sinker with that intent of like, here's the big bad. Oh, wait, just kidding. It's actually something else. But like, yeah, there's no game. There are games with multiple endings and choice, but like an RPG like this of this era with this many endings was unprecedented. And so I think your not being able to hold the information in your brain after a playthrough or two totally makes sense because it was designed, I think, with the intent of you to play it like the other three sickos on the call over and over and over and over again.
Well, it's like afterwards I went and poked around at some stuff online and found called like chronocompendium.com or something like that. And it was like, here's an illustration of the different timelines, and I'm going to now give you a dissertation on all of this shit. And I'm like, oh my God.
Still not as complicated as the Zelda timeline.
True.
Well, that's true. That's very true.
Well, also with the later versions, there's some retconning in there too.
Yeah.
I noticed, as far as to make way for the sequel that's not a sequel, depending on which developer.
Yeah.
Somebody had to bring it up, Chris. I'll fucking do it.
I'm glad you did. I mean, I get why you're not going to, but there are some scenes in there. I wish they would just kind of remove any attachment to Chrono Cross. And this is not me saying Chrono Cross is a bad game. I think Chrono Cross
I'll say it.
is a fine. It's a fine game. It has fantastic music, by the way, gorgeous soundtrack. But when it comes to the attachment to it, it kind of just fucks everything up for Chrono Trigger. Because I think Chrono Trigger was tied off nicely. It's tied off with a nice little bow. It doesn't need a sequel. The only sequel that you really need to do or address is Magus's timeline, which is to find Shala. That's the only thing that really needs to be corrected. And they kind of get into it with Radical Dreamers. And I know this isn't a Chrono Cross episode, but I think they fuck up that thread with Chrono Cross. And so when you see the Fall of Guardia animated scenes, but I don't know how to activate in order to see where you see Guardia fall, or at the ends, like you see Luca pick up Shala, who is Kid. I know, spoilers for Chrono Cross now. Sorry. Now that I didn't talk about, but it kind of ruins it for me, because I think as a complete story, Chrono Cross was perfect in how it tied everything up. It didn't need to do anything else. Yeah, Chrono Trigger. I'm sorry. Chrono Trigger was perfect in how it tied everything up. Chrono Cross was, if they had not attached it to Chrono Trigger, it would have been a lot better for it if they had just made it its own game. But I think that like the attachment to it kind of sullies both games in a sense, especially when you get into the animated cutscenes. Now you can just dismiss that outright. That's fine. But I think that, yeah, man, I think you're right, Tony. That retconning does kind of hurt, but fortunately it's not done in the game proper. It's only done in those animated cutscenes, which always felt like a bonus anyway. So is it canon? Technically, of course it is, because it's in the game. But if you just played like the straight 16-bit style of animation, which is what the original game was, you can just ignore that and pretend it never happened.
Okay, so hold on. Now I'm curious though, because you said that the only like semi-open thread was Magus, but is the retcon, because obviously I didn't play the original, so now I don't know, but there's also the part where like Chrono's mom like bumbles into a time gate. Is that a retcon?
No, that's one of the original endings. It is bumbling into the time gate.
Yeah, that's an ending.
Okay.
The thing is here, I think I'll say, so I played Chrono Cross when it came out and hated it. I have yet to replay it.
Same.
A good friend of mine, Aaron from Super Pod Saga, has been championing it, especially the Switch version, which I will buy and I will play at some point because I owe it to myself to give it another shot. That said, I don't hate the connective tissue. I just think it doesn't work well with an understanding of all of the material. Now, I haven't played Radical Dreamers, which is included in this re-release, and so I do want to get to see that too. But like, I think what's great about Chrono Trigger and its multitude of non-canonical endings is that it leaves a lot of that open, and it's a perfect story in the sense that the ending can kind of be whatever you want. Like in some endings, Frog is human. In some endings, Frog is still Frog, right? I think that having that diversity in the end of the game is really interesting, right? It's that problem that Mass Effect will eventually run into with the trilogy having 3 different distinct endings, but they're making a new one that takes place after Andromeda and the trilogy. What's that going to mean for all these choices the players made? Chrono Trigger is that on a much smaller scale, but thankfully they don't really, besides the kid thing, they don't really say there's a right ending, right? And the kid ending kind of happens no matter what. It's a little add-on, like you said, a little bonus. But I do advise that people play the 16-bit Super Nintendo version if you can get your hands on it, because that's the truest version of the game.
Yes.
But I think all versions except for the PlayStation version are worth playing just to see that stuff. But I think when we get around to this part, Shane, this is where your convolutedness kind of starts to show. Like, it is definitely there a little bit, but I think ultimately if you don't think too hard about it and just squint a little, you're fine.
Yeah, I think this is just coming from playing the game so much,
Yes.
especially like when the pre-retcon. So I mean, Super Nintendo, I think even the PlayStation version, the original, didn't have
No,
those
it did.
scenes
Yes,
in
it did.
It did.
Oh, it did?
It was in prep
Okay.
of Chrono Cross is why they had those scenes, or after Chrono Cross. I can't remember which it was, but like they were in tandem.
Same time. It's like the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's just because we're old and we played the original version so much that those retcons kind of stand out.
Yep.
But I will say at least it does give closure to Magus' sister, because that was like the original loose. That was like the only loose thread, I think, in the original
The
version.
major
We were
loose
like-
thread. Yeah.
It was the biggest
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
And it was kind of like, what the fuck? But I mean, Forest Baby. Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
Why not?
Pretty much.
Maybe we'll do Chrono Cross someday and just be upset. Maybe that will happen. I don't know.
I'm similar to Matt. I played it once when it came out and I hated it and I never touched it again.
Yeah. I mean, I want to replay it. I genuinely do. I'm in the very slow process of replaying Final Fantasy VIII for reasons. And like, I also hated that one when it came out because it was never going to live up to 7. But revisiting it now, I'm a few hours in. I'm like, this is fine. I think I was harsh on this in a way that I didn't need to be. I don't know if I'll feel that way about Chrono Cross. But nothing, like, again, at the top of the show, my ramble proves anything. Like, nothing was going to live up to Chrono Trigger. It was an impossible task for Chrono Cross. And I think that's why I want to play it again now, because I feel like I can give it a fair shot, because I am definitely more objective now than I was as a stupid teenager. Now I'm just a stupid adult, which is totally different.
Since we're on the subject about those cutscenes, playing it this time around, it kind of felt like the cutscenes detracted a little bit.
I
mean,
agree.
don't get me wrong, they were cool,
I
Yeah.
agree.
but playing it this time, the cutscenes kind of was like, oh, that was a cool cutscene. Oh, now I have to go through the original
Yeah.
version without the cutscene, and all the same actions are going to happen again. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I felt like they were kind of awkward.
Yeah, I found that really jarring as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big problem with that is like, so Akira Toriyama created these incredible animated cutscenes, but the developers didn't want to remove anything from the game, right? They wanted to keep the game intact with the cutscenes in place. And that's why we have these duplicate scenes where we see the cutscene and then we see the scene play out in engine. And I'm of two minds about it. I do think it interrupts the flow. And for someone like Shane, it can be like, oh, I'm watching this twice. Wait, why? They don't really tell you. Like if there was some kind of warning or explanation, but like for me, I think I'd be upset if it were only one or the other on the same token, right? Like I want
Yeah.
those original scenes. They were, like you said, Chris, they're so masterfully done, but I also want those cutscenes because they're cool as hell. It's like, what if Chrono Trigger was DBZ, right? Like they're such beautiful animation. And so I think there's no real right answer here. Cause like, I mean, I'll put it to the folks who have played the game before. Would you want one or the other? Or like, and
You
if
can
you
just say
would,
not Shane. That's fine.
well, because Shane, I think you would choose just have the cutscene, the animated cutscenes, right? Because you don't have the same kind of attachment. I think the rest of us wait to the original gameplay cutscenes.
Mhm.
No, you're absolutely right. And I was going to say that anyway. That if I had my druthers, I would just take the cutscenes because they're awesome. Especially quick shout out to the cutscene where you first meet Ayla. Is it Ayla or Isla?
Isla? I call it Isla. I call her Isla.
I've
I
heard it
say
both
Isla.
ways. No VO, so we don't know.
Yeah.
I've heard it both
Okay.
ways. I think it's Isla.
All right, let's go with Isla. And Chrono is just like, you can tell he's got at least a half chub like at that moment because he's just like staring in disbelief at this chick just wrecking shop, and he's just like, oh my god. But anyway, go on.
You can turn the cutscenes off in the DS version.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Interesting.
So
I was going to say there should just be an option for like original or cutscene,
yeah.
Yeah.
and that would kind of eliminate the confusion.
I wonder if that's in the Steam version and I just didn't look. Because I don't check the options. I just play the game.
Right, right.
I'm curious. I mean, yeah, then I would probably, but see, I wouldn't want to turn them off because they're so cool, you know?
Exactly, because they are awesome.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't like about the animated cutscenes, and they're great, or kind of this goes into graphics, I don't give a shit, but the one thing that kind of turns me off is that because you never know who's going to be in your party, you always get just Chrono,
Yeah.
just kind of sitting
Mhm.
around,
Yeah.
like when Frog's there, it's like, I have 3 party members. Is the other one just like chilling in a corner and like, hey, go give Frog support while he does his thing. And I'm just going to be over here, smoking a cigarette. Let me know when you guys are done or whatever, and I'll be right back.
Yeah.
That's kind of the weird thing where like when you board the Epoch and it's only Chrono in your
That's
party.
exactly what
Yeah.
I was going to say.
And
Yeah.
it's like the other
It's a
seats are empty.
strange
It's like,
thing.
this is weird.
Yeah.
That's what stuck out. That's what stuck out to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to bring up the Epoch one because it's like, oh, I have these other two people. Where the fuck did they go?
Exactly.
Like, did he make them wait on the dock?
You can always come back. You're just giving it a test run. I mean, going through time.
It is time travel.
I don't know how much we want to talk about the plot here in general, but I just want to ask all of you favorite character and why. So you already said Matt, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I can be brief. So it's twofold. One, Piccolo is my favorite character in DBZ, and facially, Magus looks pretty close, and has a similar vibe. Put upon father figure, put upon elder, all knowing. But I love Magus. I mean, long hair. He's so cool. Like long hair, pointy ears, a giant scythe, uses dark magic. I mean, yeah, as an edgy teenager who listened to heavy metal and wore all black, like I was gonna love that character. And then, of course, the discoveries you make through finding out about his past and like finding about how like his actual relationship to Lavos, like just strengthen that. A close second is Robo, just because I love a joyful robot. I grew up loving Transformers and like the chests opening up and the spells happening, and like every time he like overexerts himself, he like lets off the steam. Like I love his design a lot. He's very steampunky. But yeah, Magus through and through. The first time I played the game, I didn't know you could recruit him, and so I made mistakes. And then my friend was like, "You did what?"
It makes sense.
It does.
I did it.
Yeah, we all did.
Yep.
But yeah, I love him. I think he's a great character, and like has like I love an anti-hero with an arc. I love Wolverine. I love Venom. Like, there was a pattern growing up in the 90s for me. So yeah, Magus through and through.
Tony.
I'm gonna go. It's a hard toss up between Luca because I love a lesbian inventor chick.
Oh yeah,
she's definitely very lesbian coded, and she's just out there. She's kind of blasting shit with guns. Guns ablazing. She does kind of suck physically wise, but magic wise, she's one of the stronger characters. And I kind of just enjoy her. And she does have like a lot of depth to her. She is trying to make the world a better place through her lesbian inventor skills. So I always found her really cool. Isla is also probably a favorite of mine because she's like the White Knight character, but she has like a little twink boyfriend. And, I kind of get down with that. And so it's kind of like a reverse of gender norms. I think Chrono Trigger does a lot of stuff that was way ahead of its time. And it's never really like talked about or touched on too much because everybody just generally enjoys it. Isla had like a little Twinkie boyfriend that she used to go save, who's kind of a screw up, and she goes and rescues him and beats the crap out of dinos to save him. So I don't know. I really like both of those characters a lot, and they were always fun to play. And I think they were pretty much primaries in my party for most playthroughs.
The thing with Isla too, before I get to mine here, when she meets the party, the first thing she says, "Oh, you strong. Isla like strong man. Me like you." And then Marl says something, and she goes, "Oh, you strong too. Me like you as well."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's just down to clown if you got muscles or you can fight. Like,
yeah.
She
She does not care.
Non-discriminatory snoo.
A true pansexual icon.
Exactly.
Love to see
She's
it.
the original snoo. That's a good point.
That's true. Yeah, it's true.
65 million BC. I don't think there's much else, For me, my favorite character, I'm just going to go very cliche and say Frog.
Of course,
I think Frog's arc is probably the most developed for the time that you have with it.
Yeah.
It's very touching, especially his relationship with Cyrus. You want to go a step further, another kind of character ahead of their time. Like the relationship he has with Cyrus isn't really disclosed. You could make it whatever you really want to be in that aspect. But the fact that it is that developed, that it goes down a fantasy route that's somewhat cliche, but he loses. And in the end, he has a chance to claim victory. And what's canonical is him not taking the opportunity to do so because he's under the realization that killing Magus would not revive those that he has lost.
Yeah.
And that's really impactful. Now, in terms of developed, like on the side quests, like Luca, I think really gets developed, as we already talked about in that forest scene and how much that is there. Never really a big fan of Marl, by the way.
Nah.
Not really a big fan of hers. But all the other characters, except for Marl and Chrono, and just because Chrono is the silent protagonist, self-insertion character, which I think kind of gets blown to shit when he dies, because then it becomes everybody else that you can control. And then you get him back, and it's like, well, he doesn't need to be in your party, but he's still silent protagonist.
I feel like, by the way,
yeah,
I don't want to like step all over what you're saying, but you just brought that up, and I feel like we've been talking about the plot and writing for a while, and we haven't really directly addressed that. But as the first time playthrough person here, what a fucking like turn things totally on its head moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That was another thing that I was not expecting at all, where they're just like, oh, right. As Chris said, the self-insertion silent protagonist character that clearly has the strongest plot armor because, you know, it's your character. No, fuck you. He gets disintegrated. I was like, what? Like for a moment, I thought that they were just going to go all in on that and be like, nah, he's just fucking gone. They didn't do that, but still, just that moment was like wild.
And you don't have to resurrect him. And in fact, in the early versions of the game, you were not supposed to resurrect him.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a true sacrifice that he's gone and you fight on for him. Yeah, my jaw dropped the first time that happened. I went, wait, that doesn't happen in video games. What the hell?
You can't do that.
It's not allowed.
Not the protagonist, at least. Yeah, that was wild. I just kind of gloss over that because we've all played this 50 million times, and like Shane's like, that what? Yeah. So sorry, Shane. Do we have anything else we really want to contribute to the plot here, or are we ready to move on to gameplay? Oh, Shane, your favorite character.
You didn't ask me my favorite character. Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
God.
You went on a tangent. I apologize. Let's get right back to it. What's your favorite character?
Well, honestly, you kind of stole mine because I guess it's the cliche answer, but I really like Frog / Glenn. I do. And I think you made a good point that they give him such a great arc in such a short amount of time. I don't know. You already said all the good stuff. So that's probably my top pick. I maybe bonus side pick. I would actually go with Melchior just because like I'm a sucker for a good like old wise dude with a beard trope. So I'm kind of into that too. So he's probably my backup pick.
I mean, they have all of those old sage names, Balthazar, Melchior, right? Like it's those kind of, they were the cliche before the cliche.
Right.
Are those the three wise men?
Yes.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
They are. They're slight variations of the names of the three wise men. Yeah.
Okay.
Chrono coming back's kind of Jesus-y.
Yeah. Also true.
There you go.
How dare they rip that off from Sea of Stars?
Chris, we need to have a conversation. Just say it.
Let's get into gameplay here. Just as, once again, a primer. I know we've been talking about a plot for here a long time. So if you skipped ahead and somehow landed on gameplay, congratulations. But as a primer, as we have mentioned, this is a JRPG. Since it is part of the Square umbrella with Final Fantasy creators, you had a lot of the same people doing the battle system, battle planning, battle design, everything like that. You do have the ATB battle system right out of Final Fantasy. However, not like Final Fantasy, you fight your battles on the map. So if you run into an enemy, no random battles. Well, technically no random battles. You'll run into an enemy. Your party will split up on the map. Your screen won't flash and do a like circle and like cyclone into another screen. No, you'll be right there on the map and you'll fight it right there. There's the standard RPG kind of attacks. You have attack. You have magic, which is called tech here, which isn't always magic because it also has physical attacks, which with attacks that are specific and unique to each character for the most part. You also have the option for item, and you can escape holding the two shoulder buttons. What you don't see is defend, which I thought was interesting. That is not an option here. There's also the active and wait modes of doing it. So if you're active, no matter what, time always flows, and the enemy can attack even when you're in your options. But if it's wait, if you're in the menu to select a spell or an item, no actions will be taken. No battle gauges, attack gauges will happen over that time, and you'll have an opportunity to strategize a little bit more. So it's up to you on what your speed is. Of course, active is slightly more difficult. I'll get into this a little bit later, but I actually thought that the DS was a little bit harder to navigate, probably just out of familiarity. But that's basically Chrono Trigger. That's the primer for Chrono Trigger in a nutshell. Shane, this was your first time playing it. What was your thoughts on the gameplay, battle system, all that sorts of stuff with Chrono Trigger?
Oh, I love it. It addresses all of the problems that I have with JRPGs.
That's awesome.
No, seriously, like one of my biggest things, and Chris knows this, one of my biggest gripes with most JRPGs is I absolutely despise random battles. I hate the fact that I can be just wandering around and then just out of nowhere, it's like, cool, you are now forced to do this thing. I absolutely hate it. And I think one of the biggest reasons is because I like to be thorough in exploring a game when I play it. To me, I feel random battle systems like that actively discourage exploration because you're just like, no, I don't want to take 2 steps and then fight something just to see if there's something in that corner or not. So fuck it. I'm just going to take the most expeditious route to my next, plot point because I just can't be fucked to have to go through like 8 random battles to see if there's anything over there or not. That might just be me. I don't know. But that's the take that I always have with JRPGs. And so this is such a breath of fresh air to like be able to see the enemies in the world on the map. In many cases, you can actively avoid them if you choose to. There are certain places where you're still forced to fight them, but you do at least see them for the most part, before you encounter them. But no, I loved that. I have no issue with it. I think the techniques are awesome. I love the different combinations between the characters. Some of them are totally busted, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Like for physical damage, the X slash with Frog and Chrono is spicy. That's some good single target damage if I've ever seen it. And then one of you probably remembers this. What's the tech between Luca and Marl, the magic one?
Antipode.
Yeah, that one.
Yep.
That one is super busted. Yeah, no, I really like discovering like the different combinations of all the different things, and the fact they took the time to make all these different unique, techniques for those different combos. Plus the triple attack is pretty cool too. Also super clutch when fighting Magus, by the way. But yeah, so all in all, I don't really think I have too much to complain about. I think the mechanics of this game are super solid. I have to imagine that it was intentional. A lot of these design decisions to sort of stray away from, by that time, we're already pretty well established, JRPG mechanics tropes as far as like the random battles and that sort of a thing. So no, I dig it. I think they did a lot of good work here.
Awesome. I would generally say I agree with you, but I'll say that when it's my turn. I'll just, hey, there you go. Matt, what'd you think?
I mean, I've played this game to death. I love this battle system. The thing that cinches it for me is the things we've lightly touched on, the combined tech. So your magic spells and your skills, special skills, are combined into what's called techs or techniques, and you can combine them with either 2 or 3 people. And some of the 3-person techs are like special items that you have to find, and certain characters that like you can't do that combo until after you've lost and regained Chrono, because it's 3 characters that don't include Chrono. But they're so well done. They do so much good damage. And then even the individual characters have some, like Chrono's ultimate attack, Luminar, Dark Matter, which is Magus's final ability, all look super cool and are just, they are short enough that they're long enough that they're short enough that they're not annoying, but long enough that there's a cool animation you get to watch, which later Final Fantasies kind of screw up that equilibrium a little bit for a while.
Oh yeah.
Let me interject really quick too. The other good thing about
table, anybody?
Hey, I'm going to bolster their point a little bit. Like when you're doing those animations, the time stops. It becomes a wait battle system at that point. So that actually using a longer spell gives you more time to strategize, especially when things are moving quickly.
Yeah, it's really a great battle system. And I'm the same as you, Shane. I hate random battles. When I played Final Fantasy IV for the first time last year, I played the Pixel Remaster. And let me tell you how happy I was on the moon that I could turn off random encounters so I could just explore, because those battles are hard, even if you're over leveled. And so I love that the Pixel Remasters and most of Square's remasters allows you to turn off random battles if you need to, so you can just explore once you've done enough leveling. And Chrono Trigger, you don't have to worry about that. If you can sneak past an enemy, you don't fight that enemy. And like, especially now, as someone who's played this game so many times, there are tons of battles I skip, especially if I'm just booting up a new game plus save to see the story, because I just want to get a feel for stuff. you can sneak past a ton of battles, and I love that. I think it's really a great setup. I don't think like the only game that compares to this game as far as combat is the game that aped it and a few others, which is what you mentioned before, jokingly, Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars has come close to becoming my favorite RPG of all time because it is a mix of two of my favorite RPGs of all time, Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG. But I think that the way the active time battle works here and having the active or the wait choice, I think is really great. And both are really great ways to play. I don't think one way is better than the other. You would think after playing this game as many times as I have, and I won't speak for the other repeat offenders on the call, but like this never got stale. Like I still love this battle system. Like maybe it gets trite once you're overpowered, but even then it's like, I like the way it works. I love the different animations. It's one of the most gorgeous looking pixel art games ever made. I'm never bored playing this game, and we'll get more into that when we get to the next section. But yeah, the combat is aces for me. I think the gameplay is done really well.
Yeah, I love the combat. I mean, I think it's really one of the first games I've ever played where the characters are so integrated together, because depending on your party combination, like, oh, I get to use this attack. Oh, if I switch out her, I can use this attack, or I don't really need a healer if I use these two because they have this attack. So it's kind of like, I don't think I really ever saw that. And I think I would say I was pretty experienced by that point, by the time I got around to Chrono Trigger JRPG wise. So I hadn't really seen that before. Usually you're focused on the individual's abilities, but this also took it to the point where you're not just focused on the individual, you're focused on the team and how they interact together.
Yeah, I do like the double techs and the concept of it. But in my most recent playthrough, what I found is unless they were healing abilities, because healing abilities for the most part don't affect your entire party. And the item that you get later on, Lapis, only restores 200 hit points. And later on, you're going to get smacked around for more than 200 hit points on all party attacks. That's where I found the double text to be most useful.
Yeah.
Like when you had, like Robo and Marl, or Frog and Isla, or whatever combination with your healers. And so I would try to always make sure that at least two of those were my party so I could heal everybody at once if need be. But aside from that, once Chrono gets the gold stud, the game, and we had I kind of read ahead with the patrons, but they were right. Captain N said this, a little spoiler for the patron call outs here. But once you get the gold stud and you put that thing on Chrono, it's not an automatic win button because you still need to strategize. I certainly used to think that Luminaire is kind of broken, but you still need to think about how you apply that, because some enemies do absorb lightning. Like Frenzy's a better spell, I think, than Luminaire in certain situations, especially when you're going after a single encounter, because if you don't, Chrono doesn't have a high magic stat. He has a higher strength stat. So using Frenzy, which is 4 attacks, especially if you have a strong weapon like the Rainbow Sword, that's a better attack to do on a boss than, say, Luminaire. And that's even a better attack to do than the X Strike with Frog, because then that frees Frog up to possibly do a dual attack to heal or do something else. If you have the right equipment with the Masamune, you put on a Masamune. God, say I said Masamune. I'm just sometimes in my head. But with the Masamune, when you have the Hero's Crest, and it increases the crit. And so you'll have Frog doing crits all the time with the Masamune, which saves on his MP. So he doesn't do something like an aerial strike or a high MP costing frog smash or something like that. So I really kind of gravitated away from the dual tech, because at the same time, with the speed differences with some of the characters, and speed is a huge stat in this game. Like the differences in speed are massive. If you take both of your ATB gauges from both your characters out, that does leave an opportunity for the enemy to just smack you hard with no real opportunity to kind of counter or recuperate, potentially, especially if you're going on this game at a lower level. So when I beat this game, I was around level 52 for Chrono and 49 for everybody else, which I think is relatively low. But that means that there's a lot of quick thinking, a lot of quick item usage, a lot of, hey, like Lavos just hit me for 1,000 damage on one of my characters. I gotta recuperate fast. And when you're doing dual techs, that kind of becomes, that option becomes eliminated, and you don't really get to do that. And so that makes it even the same for triple techs. As cool as they are only useful in my opinion, once you become more experienced, I think, with the game, because when you're not experienced, like, they're all cool. You're all having fun with it. It's great. But once you become more experienced with the game, I think using them becomes more of a detriment than an advantage, just because of how it does impact your ATB gauge. And so
Right.
I don't use them as much, even though they are cool. Or I think it's good when you're overpowered and you just want to see something cool and just wipe the floor with the enemy.
No, I mean, I think you make a good point though, actually, because I encountered that, like, as much as I liked using the dual techs because I thought they're cool because they are, but there are certainly cases where it negatively impacts the action economy, like, of your turns, because you're basically eating 2 ATBs to do one thing.
Yeah.
I definitely screwed myself a few times in some fights because I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to keep spamming this, like, X slash or whatever. But then I was like, oh, but also I'm dying because nobody's healing.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
And items don't become, like, really available until, like, the second half of the game. There's also that, like, enemies will drop them occasionally. And if you have hoarder syndrome, like I do, a lot of the time I'm trying to wean myself out of that, where should I use that elixir? I might need it later. No, you won't. You need it now. But I'll be like, I only have 10 high potions. Should I really use it? Like, I don't know. I haven't been able to buy them yet. There is a lot of that in Chrono Trigger, which I'm trying to say is that's more of a me thing and not the game thing. But I'm going to blame the game because it's me saying it.
So I think the most correct thing to look at when you're trying to use the dual text is speed.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
then you wind up not wasting that economy. So I think my preferred move, which I used pretty much the whole game, is Falcon Strike. And that's between Chrono and Isla.
Yeah.
And it hits like a linear thing across the screen, pretty much for max damage, especially later on. It's a really powerful attack, but it can hit multiple enemies. It's my Lavos killer, because it can wipe the floor with all his little minions that he comes with. So that's the one that I tend to use. And then Chrono and Isla you can make them pretty comparable in speed with a few tabs.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't really waste that item economy. And then the third person is usually a healer that can somewhat heal everybody.
Especially with Marl, because she has haste.
Yeah. Also very useful.
Yes.
Even though she won't do much when she's not casting haste. But that's all you need.
She's such a limited character, though. Even on this last playthrough where I got all 15 endings, every time I used her, I was kind of like, all she can really do is heal. Like, she doesn't really do damage. She can't do physical. It's just kind of like, womp womp.
I still think haste is invaluable. That's why. Now, later, like, if you get through multiple playthroughs, I could see that. Like, if you're at, like, level 70, level 80, going through a star playthrough, at that point, it becomes kind of irrelevant. But I think in like, your first couple playthroughs, Marl is invaluable, especially towards the end of the game. That's my position with
Well,
her.
you do get helms that have haste on them. So once you equip those, I think you get 2 per playthrough, if I remember right. So pretty much by the second playthrough, everybody has haste automatically, or they should.
Yeah.
Good point. Anything else on the gameplay? We all love it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I have a gripe with the PC.
Oh,
So I have a gripe and a compliment. So the PC, I noticed that it crashes a lot.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if you guys had this problem, but the game would just straight up crash. But the redeeming quality is they kind of save state.
Yeah.
So like if the game crashes, it'll take you right to before it crashed. So you don't actually lose anything. It's more of just an annoyance of rebooting the game. So I think that's like a huge kudos to the team that fixed that. Because I remember that was a chief complaint with the PC version when it first came out, is that it crashes all the time and you lose your progress.
Yeah, I think because they had trouble fixing the crashes because they couldn't really pinpoint what would cause it every time. There are a few factors. They instead just kind of made it so the game auto saves. That way, if you get dumped, you can just boot it back up to where you were. Yeah.
Because it happened about the first time it happened about 4 hours in, and I'm perpetual, I don't save. So it crashed, and I was pretty much like, well, I'm about to tell Chris I'm not going to do this game anymore because I just lost 4 hours. And then I rebooted it up, and I was like, oh, that's really cool that it saved for me.
the DS version does not do that.
No.
Oof.
It plays like the original does. You die, you're dead. But it doesn't crash, though.
Yeah.
One real quick question before we get into the graphics here. For some reason, I remember the Super Nintendo version, you couldn't swap out your party at any time. You had to get to a save point or be on the map. Am I misremembering?
I think
No, I
I
think
think to
that's
swap
right.
out your party, you had to go back to the end of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to go to the end of time to swap out your party. You can't just do it whenever you want.
So it's not even
Yeah.
at a save point. You have to go like,
No.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
All the way
That's why
back.
it still
Yep.
weirds me out when I'm just like, I can swap my party now. I'm not supposed to do that. I'm happy that you can. So that's there. All right. Let's get into the graphics and how the graphics look. I haven't started off a section yet, so I'll just take it from here. They look great. I think that some of the animations look a little strange. That's just me nitpicking. That's it. Like some of Marl's facial animations look a little weird, like when she's staring at the camera. I don't know. Like it looks like her jaw disappears. She's just one big buck tooth. I'm like, okay. I noticed that too at the end of the game. Like some of the child sprites look weird. NPCs can look like they forgot about them at times, but that's just, I am nitpicking at that point because for the most part, we didn't get even the dungeon layout, but the like dungeons always look good. They look very creative. The enemies are always very well drawn, especially like the sprites are very Toriyama. And I'm just going to say like, this is probably, especially due with the aesthetic choice, especially going with the Toriyama design style, because Dragon Quest goes with Toriyama too. Dragon Quest came after this. This game blows Dragon Quest 6 out of the water, I think, in terms of visuals, because it just takes this style and does so much with Toriyama's art and bringing those characters and worlds to life in a way that had not been done, at least to my knowledge, that well yet, which makes it just a beautiful game. Yeah, I already said my qualms with it, but for the most part, this is top tier Super Nintendo visuals. Tony, what did you think?
I have nothing really bad. Some of the attacks, I will say, are a little dated
Sure.
as far as like how they look. But for the time, I mean, they were top tier. Like you really can't complain. And then if you kind of look into it, it's like, oh, well, they use this cool graphic to do a lightning attack. And if they want to make it fire, they do this really cool thing where they make it red. So you know it's fire. And guess what they do with water? Like, you want to know it's a water
It's
attack?
blue.
They do the same thing.
Yeah.
Blue. So some of that stuff, like replaying it recently, I was kind of like, eh. But overall, I mean, you still get that cool factor of using different abilities and stuff like that. So, I mean, that still hits home.
What about yourself, Matt?
Broadly, the graphics are the best on the Super Nintendo, full stop. It's some of the best graphics I think the system ever saw. I will spin out and focus on something more specific because I think this is something that I haven't really seen much until much more recently, except in certain other places. These are, especially for the main cast and enemies and like main supervillains, some of the most expressive sprites ever created. If you ever look at a chart, because there are a few sprite charts you can find online of just the main party and they're all the different emotions, laughing, surprise, scared, like completely different, essentially heads for all of that. Like it is definitely some of the most expressive design I've ever seen. I forgot to mention this up top, but I recently replayed Rocket Knight Adventures, which I know is hit or miss in the Discord, but is one of my favorites. And replaying it recently, it's one of my favorites because it's a Genesis game where the sprites are super expressive in a way that I didn't really remember happening until much later on. And this is the same thing. Like we're talking about the narrative before and how well the characters are conveyed. And I think Shane was saying something along the lines of like the dialogue wasn't mind blowing, but it's good dialogue. It's an interesting story. And I think a lot of what takes it to the next level, besides just the teen drama and the cool sci-fi story, is how expressive the sprites are. So you know exactly what they're experiencing in those moments, besides just the words. And there's no game on the Super Nintendo that does it like this, except maybe once we move, like when we get to the pre-rendered world of Super Mario RPG, that also does it well, but it's a different animal at that point, right?
Right.
I think for sprite-based art, before we get to the pre-render of like Donkey Kong Country and Mario, which also do it really well, for the 16-bit like Super Nintendo style pixel art, this is the best of the best.
Really quick here. Sorry, Shane, I'm going to interject again before I get to you. How that graphical design and expressiveness conveys their personality, just not in scenes, but even in battle.
Yeah.
When Marl misses an attack, she starts laughing.
Yeah.
Her sprite starts laughing. When Luca misses it, she looks all like, oh my God, what did I just do? And that goes along with their personality. And it's little details like that that really enhance the way that a game can express. And I think you made a fantastic point, Matt, in terms of the expressiveness of the sprites, because this game delivers that in spades. Shane, what's your thoughts?
I have literally nothing useful to add to this discourse because I believe you have covered it all. So I'm just going to end up echoing everything that y'all have already said. But I love me some good sprite work, and this is a peak example of that. And I think one of the biggest things for me is what Matt pointed out is the expressiveness that you get from the characters and just how many different variations they put into it. It is truly impressive. I think that's what I'm going to add.
Ooh, I have one more thing to add to that. The bosses.
Yeah.
I think the bosses are all cool and well designed. A lot of them original. I mean, like the genital wart golems kind of got weird because they were a little bit repetitive.
The genital wart golems.
I hate them. So yeah, they kind of like if someone had warts on their genitals, that's what I would picture they would look like.
Amazing.
Some of the bosses are so cool. Even Lavos is pretty iconic as a boss fight.
Well, think about that Azilla fight too, like where you're with the giant pet T-Rex and then Azilla like on the shoulder, like that giant sprite. Like there's nothing else like that in the Super Nintendo generation, like that giant sprite.
No.
Yeah, there's just some really cool, innovative bosses, and then there's general wart golems. So you know,
You take the good with bad, right?
Yeah. I can't get that out of my head. No. Thanks, Tony.
what I'm here for.
I know. I've noticed. All right. Moving on. I used to be that way, but sadly I changed. Not really. I go back there every once in a while. That's why I get along with you. Moving on to the audio department here in terms of music and sounds. And Shane, you literally had nothing to add. I think you are a good person to kick this one off so you can kind of get the conversation started. What's your thoughts on the game's audio?
Oh man, why are you gonna do this to me?
Because I want you to literally have something to say.
Are you implying that I haven't up until this point? What are you trying to say, Chris?
Mom, Dad, stop fighting. It'll be okay.
I will turn this podcast around.
God damn it.
No, it's fucking fantastic. Like I don't really have a lot to say about it. It's great. I have no criticisms, no notes. Like the overworld theme for your time period for the 1000 AD, possibly one of the best themes I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, really? Wow.
Agreed. I mean, it's not my favorite song, but yeah, I'm hearing it now that you mentioned it. Like that's how my brain works at this point. It's wired that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe not necessarily like my favorite of the entire game, but it's pretty high up there like that. And yeah, I will stand by my assessment that I think it's one of the best overworld themes like ever.
I can see that. I also like how the world themes are dynamic as well, not just through time periods, but in certain areas within the time period. Because when you walk right out of the confines of your little town, it changes. And that's what's really cool. You did not see that in RPGs of the time. They might swap in the middle of the game, but they wouldn't be dynamic in the fact that, okay, now you're in this area, the overworld is going to change. Didn't really have that. Plus, no random battles on the overworld. We didn't talk about that, but that's awesome.
Ooh.
I'll go next here with this one, and I'll say I don't think I'm going to talk much about the music. I'm going to leave that to YouTube because I'm just going to say it's excellent, and I want you two to have an opportunity to talk about that. So, Yasunori Mitsuda just absolutely crushes it with some tracks by Uematsu, of course, and you can tell that because the Tyranno theme and Kuja's final battle theme in Final Fantasy IX are pretty much the same thing. So there's your clue. It's all fantastic, not trying to take anything away. It's all great. The one criticism I will have is sometimes the sounds in this game are really bad. Like just
I'm gonna firm disagree.
Yeah,
I think the sounds are
I'm with Tony.
iconic.
Yeah, like the thought of like
the dinosaur.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah.
no, there's
Lavos.
more like no. I'm not saying Lavos or the dinosaur. What I'm saying is that There are instances in this game where there's sounds that just don't sound quite right. Like they tried really hard to make it sound good, and it just doesn't sound good. Now, when there's creatures screaming and stuff like that, that sounds fine. But like sometimes the blocks when you hit an enemy or when doors open or stuff like that, there's sounds in this game. I'm just like, that kind of sounds like crap. Not all sounds.
Actually, me.
Okay, the only one that I would agree with you on, and this, I don't know, maybe this is a hot take. I'm going to gauge it by whether or not I get massacred by the other two people on the call here in a second.
We're already there.
Yeah, well, that's for you. I'm dodging bullets over here. But no, is the sound when you like trigger an event, like a battle with some of the enemies. Like I feel like it's mostly in, I want to say like the prehistoric era. I'm not sure if it crosses over, but that screech sound, it sounds like oddly out of place in that it sounds very like compressed versus like a lot of the other sound effects. Like it, to me, it's not great, but that's really the only one that like stood out to me.
Sure.
See, there's some sounds that sound bad.
Are you telling me if I pick up a rock and I threw it at Chris right now, it would make a plunk sound?
Of course it would.
Is that kind
Of course.
like that's what a rock sounds like when it hits somebody?
I'm just going to completely recant my position on that based on that point there, Tony. I think you have convinced me. I am a born again sound aficionado for Chrono Trigger.
I'll even throw a hotter take on there. If Jurassic Park would have played this game, I think the dinosaurs would have sounded better.
I agree. I'm with you, Tony. High fives. High fives all around. No, I fine, sure. I don't know that I agree. I think the plock sound of like someone getting clocked over the head is so vibrant and so like visceral. I think the sound design is really great in this game. Fun fact about sound design, the laugh that happens in the carnival. I only played Final Fantasy VI for the first time a handful of years ago. I still haven't finished it, but I know that laugh is a reused version of Kefka's laugh. I didn't know who the hell Kefka was. So at the time I was like, oh, this is just a fun laugh for a little clown character. And then when I played 6 for the first time, I was like, oh, hey, that's the clown's laugh from Chrono Trigger. And everyone's like, what is wrong with you? Go walk off a pier. That's Kefka's laugh. It's iconic. And I was like, oh, okay, sorry. So I think that's pretty funny. No, I mean, I love the sound design in this game, but most importantly, the music. Saying that this is the best game ever made, there's some hyperbole there. But this is one of the best video game soundtracks ever made, full stop. There's no hyperbole, it's just fact.
Yes.
I feel very confident saying that. My favorite track of all time is The Battle with Magus. Character, and that I'm going to use it to point out why this is the best soundtrack ever, because Nobuo Uematsu always did, and Yoshinori Mitsuda also did this. They pulled world sounds into this music. Battle of Magus is a bossa nova track. If you listen to bossa nova, it's got the same kind of pace and beat, but it's a villain song in an epic battle. Like, there's tons of that throughout this whole game, things that would sound familiar in other genres that they kind of match up here. It is easily my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. Like, again, jokingly, you know, Robo's theme sounds like Never Gonna Give You Up, which did exist before this game came out. So like, whether that's on purpose or not, I don't think they've ever officially stated. That's awesome. You know, there's just this pop music in this. There's, you know, the prehistoric stuff, like the rhythm, the drum and beat of like the prehistoric main theme, like all of that stuff is just so incredibly done. And then the remaster, like kind of zhuzhed up sound for the DS and PlayStation version, just a crisper, more clear version of those original tunes. And is the definitive way to listen to it, at least on Spotify. I love this soundtrack so much. I listen to it weekly, probably at this point. It's always on in the background. Even if you don't have an opportunity to play this game anytime soon and you don't want to emulate it, go onto Spotify and listen to the soundtrack. They have the DS version, like I said. I think you'll just enjoy jumping around the soundtrack and hearing the music. Also, I didn't mention this before, a lot of emotionality in the soundtrack.
Yes.
Like the sad tunes that they play during those sad moments. the opening when Chrono's first waking up, this kind of hopeful theme. It's all done so well. And you really, the Lavos battle, the first Lavos battle, when Chrono sacrifices himself, like you feel that impact because of the music for that battle too, the freneticism of it. So yeah, that I love the sound in this game so much. It's probably my favorite thing about it, and that's saying something because I love the whole thing.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. Don't even need to repeat anything. You're 100% right on that. Now, Tony, we have talked in the past about music. You say you don't really pay attention to it. So I am curious if you have a take on music in this game.
I mean, it's there. I'm not really a music person.
Yeah.
It's just, I will say the prehistoric theme is still a jam because I did love that as a kid. And I instantly fell back in love with it when I replayed it. I was like, I like this, especially because you can wander into the back area of the carnival and they're playing it, and instantly like nostalgia punched me in the face like a rock that goes kerplunk, you know?
Way to tie it together, Tony. Great job.
By the way, my favorite tracks as you pulled yours up is, well, like when I really get down to it, it's the final, not the final boss track, but the one right before the final boss track. The penultimate final boss track. Yeah, that's such a good track. But there's not, you don't have to go wrong on any of these tracks, as you already said. I debate myself which is better between Chrono Cross's and Chrono Trigger's soundtracks. They're both by Mitsuda, and they're both absolutely fantastic, but I might have to give the edge to Chrono Trigger just because it is a better game, I think. So, yeah, they're brilliant. But I'm also a Streets of Rage 2 nut job, so I'm always going to say that's better just because I have to defend my turf.
It's an incredible soundtrack. I mean, one of the best Genesis soundtracks. My favorite Genesis soundtrack is Rocket Knight, just because the nostalgia. But like,
it's also a brilliant soundtrack. Yes, it's a great one. Yes. Yeah, at least on the Super Nintendo, no matter what anyone says, this is the best one. Like,
I agree.
Undebatably. And if you want to debate that, that's fine. You can be wrong, but I'm willing to hear it. I'll hear you out. I'll have an open mind for like 30 seconds. Anyway, I think we're going to move on to the patron pontifications, but before I do, I'm going to drop a little bit of a bomb here. I want to see where this goes. There's a scene that happens, and I want your thoughts on this. That happens, I think it's after the fight with Magus, where your mom comes in and tries to wake you up. And then that's never discussed again. Everyone knows what I'm talking about here. Does anyone know what that scene is? Does anyone know what that scene means?
This is it's a Super Mario 2 situation. It was all a dream.
That's not how it ends though. So I'm wondering, has that ever been revealed? Matt, I know this is your favorite game of all time. Do you have any inkling on that?
Under the bus there.
A little bit, because I know I love the game. I never found out what it meant. For a while, it seemed to calm down, but there's always been like what does it mean? Is it a dream? Is Chrono in a dream? Or does that mean something else where your mom tries to wake you up in the middle of the game, says, hey, you need to wake up, you've been sleeping. Has it ever been revealed what that means?
I think it's just meant to be a dream. Like he's dreaming and then he wakes up and it's
okay.
He was just dreaming about his childhood life. Like, I don't think there's more meaning to it than that. As far as I know, like this would be the first I've ever heard that there's more meaning to it.
Yeah.
Just, it was a dream.
It's just really oddly placed.
Kind of. I mean, it isn't because that's the point where you kind of get like knocked out and you end up back in 65 million BC, right? Yeah. So I think that's just him being unconscious and his mind just going towards like a safe space.
Yeah.
Possibly.
It was the trope at the time in like anime and cartoons and other things of like, you're out cold, like, oh, mommy, let me have 5 more minutes. I want to sleep more. Like it's a tropey thing. So I think that's all it's meant to be, as far as I can tell.
Okay. I just wanted to know if there's more to that.
And I don't appreciate your snark calling into question how much I love this game and what I remember.
I'm not trying to.
I'll come for you. Don't make me change my mind to Shane being my favorite host.
Aww.
Ooh, wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
So Shane is your least favorite host by that admission.
Technically, that is true.
I just learned that I'm the favorite host. I'm delighted.
I'm kidding. I can't choose between you two. I love you both so much.
See if you ever get another side quest out of me, you bastard.
I mean, you want to do it about one of your favorite games. So like, I think you're just as burning as much to do it as I am to receive it. So
That's true.
There's that.
Fine. You got me there.
Yeah.
All right, now it's time to go into our patron pontifications, and oh boy, we have a lot of them, and we are going to read all of them. Why? Because we love our patrons, and I don't want to quite cut it off yet. We don't have that many patrons. If you want to be a patron and you want to contribute, I'm not saying I will cut it off. I don't want to have to cut it off, but if I get too many, that might have to happen.
What are you cutting off?
Nothing.
Oh. Okay.
Let me start this over because that sounds awkward. Ashton, please cut a lot of that out. If you want to contribute to that and be part of the patron pontification read off here, because we are reading all of them, just head on over to our Patreon, which is in the Linktree link in the episode's description, and check that out if you want to support us. Also join our Discord because this is where we pull it from. And first we have Raging Demon, who is from the Command List podcast. And Raging Demon says, I have never played Chrono Trigger, but I think it was important that I comment. Thank you, Raging Demon. Shane.
Fantastic. All right. Next up on the list, we have Captain N, aka Brian from the Retrotopia podcast, who says, to watch you two go so low as to talk about the greatest game of all time on a niche that's pronounced like niche. There, see, I did you a solid. Style podcast is something else. My comment is that once you get a gold earring and luminaire, the game is basically autopilot. 95% of all enemies fall instantly to that attack, and it's way overpowered. Other than that, great story that flows well, lots of paradoxes, and a frog with a mental health disorder. Are we in France? 10 out of 10. This game rules the retrosphere, and I am happy it won King of Games 96, spoiler, even though it was released in 95. What a champ.
Thank you, Captain N.
I'll grab the next one. Storm Beagle, aka Sam from the Retrotopia podcast. Storm Beagle says, I just finished this game on my DS! Exclamation point. At first, I thought I may have overpaid for my copy, but I will say it was worth the price of admission. I can easily say this is now one of my favorite RPGs and one of my favorite game experiences in recent memory. The best part is that there is more to experience with the New Game Plus, and I will definitely return to it. I found the game as perfectly balanced as the Masamune, and I did zero grinding, and with the main story and a few optional side quests, was ready to take on the end game. It's a near perfect experience start to finish. The story lost me at times, but I'm not always in it for the story. Gameplay hooks me, and this is a 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Thank you, Sam. Tony.
All right. The next one is from Ray Ray, the bad game guy. One word of advice. Don't stay up all night trying to beat Chrono Trigger before driving to Las Vegas at 6 a.m. Actually, that's a lot of words. On the other hand, probably a top 10 favorite game of all time. How they managed to do all this time traveling, which is a fascinating subject as is, I will never know. Any JRPG fan should play it.
All right. Thank you, Ray Ray. Next is Alt. I didn't forget him this time, Matt.
Good. Great. Awesome.
I hope that doesn't make it in because it makes no sense because I fixed it in post. Anyway, back.
Because you fixed it in post. Anyway, yeah.
All right. Next is Alt. And Alt says, Chrono Trigger is one of those games you hear all the time on top 10 Super Nintendo games, even from non-RPG fans. It's one of those titles, much like Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy VII, that transcends the genre audience, and despite that, has not yet gotten the 2D HD remake treatment. I finally beat Chrono Trigger a year or two ago, and while it doesn't live up to the massive reputation it has, much like Final Fantasy VI to me, it's a damn fine game. It was ahead of its time, there's no denying that, but I don't think it's fault-free. No game is, even if it's 10 out of 10 outrageous. There's static encounters that can be annoying when you're backtracking, but the music and story look great. Akira Toriyama art in a modern RPG where it's not Dragon Quest first-person battles is a massive selling point. I think the fact you saw Chrono and friends during battle is why Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy in general style RPGs finally took off in the West. There's a lot of history with this game, and it's earned its place in the all-time greats standing beside Earthbound or Final Fantasy VI in the SNES library. I'm not someone who will die on a hill saying Chrono Trigger is the best JRPG of all time or anything, but I could never say it's overrated or bad despite my reputation of being harsh on games. It truly is a 5 out of 10 title. Joking, of course, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. I don't know. All right. Thank you, Alt.
All right, next on the list, we have FF Cottage, who says Chrono Trigger is considered a top 5 JRPG for many fans of the genre. And though it's not in my upper echelon, I can see why it ranks so high for so many. Its Toriyama designs are excellent, gameplay is engaging, soundtrack is outstanding, and the story is stellar. Such brief reflections make me long to play it again. Perhaps once I do, it'll break the glass ceiling. But either way, I've got nothing but love for Chrono Trigger. Thank you, FF Cottage.
Next up is Soha. I was ridiculed and shunned for saying I hadn't beaten Chrono Trigger a couple of years ago. Well, I have beaten it. It's one of those games that really precedes its reputation. I'll be the first to make this wordplay and say that this game is timeless. It really is. I won't retread on what has already been said by other patrons. My comment is solely on the discussions on, does this game need a remake? I don't think it does. I think that this game is already in its perfect form. Could it have received the Final Fantasy VII remake treatment? Probably, but I don't really want this story to be touched. I'm conflicted about it. What about you guys? I mean, I agree. I don't think this needs a remake. Maybe a 2D HD where they change nothing except the graphics, but even then, I feel like it doesn't really need it.
Yeah, I don't really want to see it remade anyway. I think it's fine as is. Just port it. Keep porting it. That's all I want to see. Put it on modern consoles, you cowards.
I agree. I don't think there's a reason. If anything, I think an HD remake or whatever is just an opportunity to fuck it up.
True, especially since Toriyama is no longer with us. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Shane. It can only go downhill from where it's at now.
Yeah.
Pretty much perfect almost.
The only thing I could see is maybe a remaster adding extra frames of animations to the sprites, because that was just something they couldn't do. But like that would be it. Just add more pixels to the sprites and add more frames of animation, and that's all that really needs to be done.
Next up is Dave Jackson, the Tales from the Backlog and the Top 3 podcast. I played Chrono Trigger for the first time in 2020 after decades of hearing how amazing it is. Most games would struggle to live up to that praise, and to be honest, Chrono Trigger didn't live to it either. But I can see why it would be someone's favorite game. Each part of the Dream Team carries their weight, especially Toriyama's art and the music from the combo of Mitsuda and Uematsu. Seriously, this might be the best OST ever made. For me, the story never reached the highs of my favorite games in the genre, but I do appreciate the pacing, and overall, Chrono Trigger is worthy of its place in the JRPG pantheon.
All right. Thank you, Dave, for that. And thanks, Tony. Going on to JC. JC says, never heard of it. What is Chrono Trigger? Some fancy watch? Joking. I am aware of the respect this game commands, but I haven't played it yet. Shocking, I know. Wow. So hopefully this episode will be the driving force pushing me to finally do it. Yes, you will do it, Jay. You will do it, JC. Yes. If you want us to drive you to do it, I'm commanding you do so. Go put this in your Super Nintendo original cartridge right now. If you don't have it, go to your local retro game shop or eBay. I'm sure the prices will be fine. Moving on. Thank you, JC. Check out JC's Instagram account. It's fantastic.
All right. Next, we have the one and only resident contrarian Keith Gasper of the Still Alive Main Quest podcast, who says, as I drown in my hole of RPGs in the 90s and 2000s, I had heard about Chrono Trigger, but never really crossed paths with it or heard anyone else that had played it until the internet became the internet, and seemingly everyone had played it. I experienced it for the first time in 2019, and while I don't think it lived up to the 20 plus years of hype, I do think it's very good. The soundtrack is perfectly synced with the tone of the game, and the gameplay systems are unique and even revolutionary for its time. Speaking of time, that's where the game loses me. Once you introduce time travel into a plot which the story is dependent on, the game loses a ton of credibility for me because now nothing matters. No impact. And overall made me feel like I shouldn't even care what happens to the characters. I think Chrono Trigger is way overhyped, maybe a bit overrated. Is it the best game of all time? Nah. Best RPG? Possibly. Best game for the SNES? That's a good conversation. but it is a great game. All right. Well, thank you for that take, Keith.
There's a lot of tones going on in that take.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Instead, I'm going to move on to Omi. Omi says, Hironobu Sakaguchi, Yuji Horii, Akira Toriyama, Yoshinori Mitsuda, and Nobuo Uematsu, the dream team from Square and Enix. A once-in-a-lifetime collaboration that produced one of the world's best RPGs. Ironically, the team was never reassembled after the Square Enix merger. That is ironic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Omi.
All right. Next up is Dischimera, who runs the Game Over Hell YouTube channel. My brother introduced me to Chrono Trigger via emulation way back then, during Windows 98 times. I think before we fell in love with the game at the time, but I didn't go far enough in it until I was an adult. For a long time, I used to think Chrono Trigger was very overrated and that Cross was better. Upon revisiting both, I don't know what I was thinking. Cross, while deserving of the hate, tells a story like shit, committing so many writing sins. Whenever someone new to the JRPG asks me where to start, I usually point them to Chrono Trigger. It's a very easy game with a combat system that's very easy to grasp and feels like the faster version of the classic ATB system, without the overload of options the Final Fantasy ATB games have, making it a perfect entry point for beginners, all while telling a story that has nearly a perfect pace and follows its own time travel rules consistently. Do you have any idea how rare it is for a story not to get completely ruined by introducing time travel to it? I mean, you're talking about this game now, so I guess you do. Square Enix has never done time travel narratives right since then. I also want to drop two important names in Chrono Trigger history, the Tetsuyas, Nomura and Takahashi. Takahashi being Nomura's mentor as a graphic director at the time. Now let's not forget Masato Kato, who deserves credit for the scenario. To make an analogy that maybe not many will understand, Trigger is the Dexter's Lab of JRPGs, a project that just turned out to work incredibly with a number of creators that would end up splitting after to make their own individual successful careers since. I guess Dexter's Lab was a big audience and merchandise success, while Trigger has always been rather niche, but you get the point. If you enjoy the music in Trigger, and who doesn't, check out Malcolm Robinson's arrangements of the soundtrack. It's freaking amazing.
I will have to check that out.
That was a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Big one there. All right. Next one is Mass Keaton, the high score challenge extraordinaire. And Mass Keaton says, I don't have anything to say that I didn't say on Still Loading Podcast Pontification segment. Yep. Go check out friend of the show, Still Loading Podcast, Josh Koval over there. But some of you may not be listening to Still Loading. You should give Josh a listen. Seriously, try an episode. In any case, here's what I said. When I was in high school, I was an RPG kid, and I really wanted Chrono Trigger. Mom thought I should get a class ring because that's what normal kids got. My class ring sits in a drawer somewhere. I wish I had Chrono Trigger. P.S. I did get to play it in college. It was awesome. I agree.
Yeah. My class ring is somewhere. I don't know. I actually don't know where it is now. All right. Next up, we have Lyle of the You Random podcast and also the primary patron saint of this here show. And he says, Chrono Trigger is probably my favorite JRPG of that era that I haven't finished. It's beautiful, sounds amazing, is fun to play, somehow makes a time travel story actually good, and also coherent. I'm thankful for the reminder to go back and finish it. Now go play Persona 4 Golden. Smooches. Thanks, question mark, Lyle?
They're coming for you.
He's always coming for me. Never ending.
Never ending.
Better than on you.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, it took us almost over 2 hours to get to Never Ending Come. Great. Anyway, the final patron pontification. I'm just going to talk over it so we can't edit that out. Keep that in, Ashton.
Yeah, keep it in.
Lunchbox, aka the Disgruntled Gamer, who also does the Thunderdome Gaming Society YouTube channel, says Chrono Trigger is still one of the best RPGs during the 16-bit era. It looks good, plays good, and with its time travel aspect, it's not confusing. Maybe someday we will receive a proper sequel or even a prequel to this game. Yeah, I know Chrono Cross exists, nor do I care. Yeah, and that sounds about right.
Well put.
Shots fired.
Appropriate shots. Now that all of their shots have been fired, it's our turn to fire our shots on whether or not this game holds up today. As is tradition, myself and Shane will go first, giving our guests the final word on whether or not it holds up. And I will just kick this off, and I will be extraordinarily brief. That's a yes. I think it does. It definitely holds up today. Go back and listen to the episode. I don't think we said, if we said anything negative about this game whatsoever, it was nitpicking in the most extraordinary degree. There's not a lot I can say here that's bad about it. I already said on, I think, The Flight that, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, this was my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time. I think that's what I said. If I didn't, I should have said that because it is. I think it's the best Super Nintendo game ever made. Do I think it's the best 16-bit RPG? I already said on Lunar Eternal Blue, I prefer that one. I prefer Eternal Blue over Chrono Trigger, but I do recognize in order to understand Eternal Blue, you have to play another game in order to get all those ideas through, whereas Chrono Trigger is a self-contained masterpiece that you can get done in under 20 hours. So I think, like, if you're looking for the premier JRPG for anyone to just get into and try from the 16-bit era, if that's what you're interested in, if that's what you're looking for, Chrono Trigger is that game. There's no other way around it. So absolutely it holds up. Go play it if you haven't already. And to all of our patrons that said they haven't played it or finished it, get on it. This is worth it. Shane?
I mean, yeah, like, yes, of course it holds up. I mean, it's Chrono Trigger. Like, come on. I mean, a JRPG that also respects your time, practically unheard of. So, I mean, on that merit alone, I would recommend it. No, it's got every, I mean, what do you expect, right? From like the developer dream team that was behind this thing? Like, of course you were going to get something fantastic. And we did. Like, sure, there are some minor grievances, like what I pointed out with some of the maybe a lot to take in parts of the story. And actually, one of the pontifications brought up a good one that I didn't mention either, which is it can be mildly annoying that there are some preset encounters that you just have to like slog through if you're doing some backtracking, or should I say when you do some backtracking. That's kind of a pain, but those are super minor in the grand scheme of things. Like, this game it lives up to its reputation. There's a reason that, you know, it's on the top of damn near every single list that it's on. So yes, you should play it.
Well said. So 2 for 2. Are we going to get a dissenter here? I don't know. How about you, Tony?
I'm not going to dissent. I think the game absolutely holds up. I will say some of it is probably dated aesthetic wise, like the menus and stuff like that. They're a little basic for like the modern gamer, but overall, I think this is just a masterpiece that holds up. Story wise, I think it holds up in almost every aspect. And I mean, it's probably one of my favorite games of all time. I'm not biased though. I promise.
Oh, I trust you. I believe you. Speaking of not being biased, I'm curious to hear what Matt has to say about their favorite game of all time and whether or not it has held up. So Matt, has this game held up, and bring us home?
Yes. Not to toot my own horn, but as of when we were recording, I recently wrote an article on the Fun and Games Patreon, free for all to read, about how nostalgia affects our ability to talk about games and whether that's good or bad. And while I absolutely came to no definitive answer on it because it's all subjective, I think it's totally possible to be charmed by something from your youth that's nostalgic and still talk to why it's great. Since most of our thoughts and reviews on games are affected by the other games we've played, you cannot be subjective. Like, your influences and your experiences will influence what you like in the future. But that said, Chrono Trigger is one of those games that every time I revisit it, I find something I missed. Still to this day, there's so much in that game. I get to do a thing I didn't do, or like it took me a very long time to finally see all 15 endings, which I of course have seen by now. But like, I didn't do that in my childhood. I didn't actually see all of the endings till I was an adult, especially when the DS let you like track which ones you've unlocked. But it is one of the most interesting games to come out of this era. And what is consistent through all of the patron pontifications is that the game is known and the game is known well. Love, hate, best, worst, just okay. It is known, and it has this oeuvre and this, legacy that is really important, I think, not just to RPGs, but to video games. And I will die on the hill that it has some of the best sprite work in the history of video games, that other games have taken huge inspiration from. As someone who grew up interacting with tons of Akira Toriyama's work and losing him very recently, as of when we're recording it this year, is kind of like, I cry over some important deaths in life, musicians I relate to, whatever. But I cried really hard when Toriyama died. A man I've never met in person, who I don't know at all, because his art affected me pretty much from childhood until adulthood, from Chrono Trigger to Dragon Ball Z to Dragon Quest to all of this stuff. And I think his legacy, the distillation of like why he is so good at what he does, is very much in this game. So yeah, it holds up. If you haven't played it, go play it. If you have played it and haven't finished it, go finish it. And if you've played it already, play it again. It is, to me, one of the most perfect encapsulations of what makes video games easy to love.
Very well said. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for both of our guests being here today, talking about a game that apparently we all love, and we all enjoy, and is highly recommended by all of us. Go play Chrono Trigger. Just, I don't care how you play it, but it is available for purchase if you want to support it, which I do encourage. Go on Steam and pick it up if possible. But if not, yeah, just play it any way you can, is really what it comes down to. This is one of those monumental games. But thank you to both of you once again for stopping by, giving us your thoughts, for giving us your time, and just having great takes, and deeply do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy that I was able to bully my way onto your podcast.
I'm happy you did.
And I'm happy. I'm just happy that someone voted, nominated this, and then everybody voted for it. I don't know who nominated it, but I'm sure they're an asshole.
I'm definitely sure they're an asshole, Tony. I know them for a fact to be an asshole. It's an asshole I happen to like, but an asshole nonetheless.
Well, we all know Chris loves his assholes.
That's true. Big fan of assholes.
Yeah.
I won't say I'm not going to turn any down, because that can go in some weird directions. But everyone has assholes. I mean, who doesn't appreciate assholes to some extent? Anyway, Shane, help me out here.
I like that in a sort of like indirect way, we brought everything back around to Limp Bizkit. So I appreciate that. As we are want to do, Ooh. And I got to say it this time. That's fantastic.
That's a late want.
I know, right? We freaking 2 hours and 40 something minutes in, and we just got to it. It's surprising. At any rate, we always leave some time here first before we do our own, self-absorbed spiel thing, to make sure that our most esteemed guests get to plug the stuff that they got going on. I mean, I can put you into the Thunderdome and decide which one goes first, so, discuss amongst yourselves. But why don't you guys put out there what you got going on so the people know?
I'll go first.
Go for it.
It's pretty simple. I'll just promote the Retro Hangover review crew. Remember that I'm a part of, Chris is a part of as well, and we're pretty active in it. We review games. So like you'll see a lot of the people from the show on there, and they have different opinions. And I'm sure we all agree and get along, or especially if it's a beloved game, like, we're not going to have any dissenting opinions in there, especially with me and Alt, who seem to trash most games. But it's a great crew, and it's a great perspective, and it kind of gives you a little, wink behind the show.
Yeah. As someone who's only come to it recently and only done a few so far, it's a blast, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And it's got me to try stuff that is truly terrible, like Secret of Evermore, which I will never forgive anyone for. Anyway.
I thought it was okay, but I'm glad you guys hated it.
As for me, I mean, I've been on before. I will try and keep this as brief as possible, although I have one less podcast now, so that's how that goes. But I am the host of several podcasts. The Fun and Games podcast, which I host with Jeff Moonen, which is mostly a conversational podcast talking about, console retrospectives, interviewing developers, talking to composers, talking about different video game franchises. We have an episode coming up as of when we're recording on video game showcases and how they've kind of taken over the games industry with folks who put on their own indie showcase, which is with the 6-1 Indie folks, which is going to be really great. We have a sub-series within the feed called Side Quests, with which both of your illustrious hosts have done, which is a opportunity for someone to talk for 5 to 10 minutes about a game they love and why they love it. Shane did one on Dark Souls, the original, and then Chris has done one on Final Fantasy Renaissance, which was one of our first non-official games, which was really exciting to have someone cover. And then also Chris did his first one on Saga Frontier, which is a beloved franchise that a lot of folks sleep on. And so it's really a way to celebrate the games we love. We did every 50 episodes, Jeff and I bring a guest on to do a more long form roundtable version of Side Quests. And we did Chrono Trigger pretty early on because it's a favorite of mine and Jeff's. And there's an incredible trans creator named Chrono Katie who has been championing Chrono Trigger and all the Chrono stuff for ages. And she came on and she was wonderful. And so if you want to hear more Chrono Trigger stuff, you can go check that out. Then I also do very briefly a BioWare podcast with Frankie Bradley Lestrange. We started covering the Mass Effect franchise. Now we're on to the Dragon Age franchise, which makes us current for the first time in the history of our show because there's a new Dragon Age coming. But we put ourselves in the shoes of the main character, create them to look like us, and make choices if we were those characters, and then discuss. But mostly it's an excuse to talk about who we romance because, that's the stuff everybody really cares about. And then the last thing is I'm the editor for the Game Informer show, which is one of the longest running video game magazines in history. It is a great weekly podcast for video game news, and I occasionally get to guest on it as well. I edit the audio version, and it's a blast to do that every week. I think that's everything. I'm on social media as DJ_Stormageddon, including TikTok and Twitch, where I stream occasionally, but I'm trying to do that more. Yeah, that's it. I kept it to like a tight 5. I'm kind of proud of myself.
All right. Well, thank you both. As far as we here are concerned, you've done the hard part. You have found us. I mean, you could also argue that the hard part is making it all the way to this point of an episode. I won't begrudge you that, but you're here. And so that means that you have great fortitude and or stamina, and I applaud you. And if you would like to check out more of what we've got going on, there is certainly no shortage of that. You can check out the rest of our backlog here on this main feed as we are quickly approaching a decade of talking on the internet. And if you would like to support the show in a more concrete fashion for as little as $1, one clam, 1 shekel a month, if you will, you can get access to our Patreon. And there's a whole other bevy of content there just waiting for you to consume, like the ravenous podcast listener that I know that you are. So if that is something that entices you, please consider checking that out as well. As Chris mentioned earlier in the episode, that also gets you some additional bennies as being a patron, participating in the patron pontifications and voting on certain episodes that we do and all sorts of fun stuff. So definitely check that out. We also do have our merch store still open. Lots of cool stuff there. I'm still very pleased with the baseball tee that I just got recently with our logo on it. It's very chic, very, very fetching. So I personally recommend that one. And we also got a whole bunch of other stuff. Social media, we got YouTube if you want to go that route. We've also got a Twitch channel, which I have forever condemned Chris to talk about until the end of time, or maybe the heat death of the universe. But anyway, Chris, what do we do over there on Twitch, and why does it still not involve hot tubs? Is that meta done? I think that's done now.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're having me talk until the end of time, that's fine, because I can hang out with an old man who stores eggs in his jacket. But I just want to say that now that we're at the end of this episode, you can join us at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Sundays. And I'm just going to start saying wild shit here because I want to see who listens this far, and just say, no one answered my question about what assholes taste like last week, but you might be able to find out
Pennies.
what the answer to that question is if you join our Twitch stream. As Tony just said, pennies, that has been an answer in the past. I put that call out. Maybe it doesn't have to be assholes. You can just tell me how body parts taste. It could be any body part. Maybe you're an aspiring
salty.
It could be salty, especially when you come back from the gym.
Salty milk and coins.
Who knows what things taste? I mean, is going to the gym a flavor enhancer? I want to hear these answers. I don't know why.
You ever egg something on and then immediately regret your choice? Because that's where we landed.
This is where we're at.
Just throwing it
But
out
just
there.
because we are almost 3 hours into this episode, I want to see who stays around. So let me know what various salty body parts taste like. What's the saltiest?
Anchovies.
What tastes like anchovies? Because Tony says something tastes like anchovies. Don't spoil it, Tony. I want our Discord to respond. Or you can respond in the chat over at twitch.tv/retrohangover at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Sundays. And we hope to see you there talking about this stuff. And you better come prepared to talk about this stuff because we have a member there called Ichibuti. So he's going to know if you're full of shit or not. And he might know something about what it might taste like to get a little bit of shit in there from time to time as well. So go on. I'm sure the questions, they can be there. Be respectful. Do that. But aside from that, that's all I have, Jade.
How the fuck do you cap all of that off with be respectful? You can't just erase the last 2 minutes of heinous garbage that you put out there.
Because I
with
don't want them showing up to the Twitch stream. Booty shows up and they're like, hey, what does it taste like to eat shit? I think, at least ease your way into the Ichibuti conversation.
You need some foreplay.
Okay. You gotta oil it up first.
A little bit.
I bet it tastes shitty.
Musk is a flavor enhancer. Anyway, good Lord. All right, let's wrap this thing up where we're getting into the almost 3-hour delirium here, I can tell. So with all of that probably regrettably being said, until next time.
Play with your My Name is Gato joysticks. Before I do either of you want to read it?
Yeah. The first one? No, I'll
not the first
join
one.
in.
Not the first one.
Yeah. I'll join in for reading them.
Yeah, I can read.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I learned how to read.
Tony knows how to read. How dare you?
Yeah.
I almost want to keep that in. All right.
Leave it. I don't care.
Don't. Ashton, cut that out. You put it in the outtakes. All right.
Shane here with a quick message. You know, the one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this. It has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee. And Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in head first with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.